from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits.
Chemistry tonight is electric.
As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very, very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. Of course, we're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump is due to give a live press conference very shortly. In fact, he was meant to start an hour ago as the presidential race heats up with only 1 week to go. We'll bring you this, of course, fully live. And a new poll shows that Sir Keir Starmer is the least popular Prime Minister in modern history, with his approval ratings absolutely tanking 49 points since the general election. And meanwhile, Labour and the Tories are tied neck and neck on 27%, with Reform surging to 21%, their highest ever polling rating. And that's all coming up in your next hour. Well, it's a show, always a pleasure to have your company. It is, of course, the night before the budget, and that's the night before Halloween. People expecting a nightmare on Downing Street, and we are all eyes on Donald Trump, due to give a press conference very shortly. We'll cross that the moment it happens. In the meantime, get in touch the usual way, and that is gbnews.com/your say. But now let's kick off with your headlines, and here's Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just gone 3 o'clock. These are your headlines from the GB newsroom. The Chancellor says the NHS is the lifeblood of Britain, promising to reverse a decade of neglect and underinvestment. But she warns that a single budget can't undo 14 years of damage. It comes as Rachel Reeves is set to unveil a budget injecting billions into the NHS, funding 2 million more appointments, with £1.5 billion aimed at new surgical hubs and scanners and £70 million for radiotherapy. However, speaking to us this morning, Health Secretary Wes Streeting admitted that significant improvements will take time.
What tomorrow's budget will give us the chance to do is arrest that decline and mark a turning point in the history of the NHS and in the decline we've seen over the last 14 years. Today what we're talking about is the delivery of our manifesto commitments to cut waiting lists. So the 40,000 more appointments every week we said as our first step, and we are already ramping up to those 40,000 more appointments.
Meanwhile, ahead of the budget tomorrow, Sir Keir Starmer's been told it is not too late to change his mind on winter fuel payment cuts, with Conservative MPs handing in a petition signed by 250,000 people. At this time of year, more than 11 million pensioners would normally be receiving a letter from the Department for Work and Pensions confirming when their winter fuel allowance would be paid. Instead, the letters arriving this year are informing approximately 10 million pensioners they will not be getting their usual payment. Shadow Work and Pension Secretary Mel Stride had this message for the Labour government.
Scrap this means testing of the winter fuel payment, because it means 10 million pensioners losing out, and 2/3 of those pensioners below the poverty level will lose this benefit, and we don't believe that's right.
Now, former Conservative MP Aaron Bell says he's disappointed a watchdog's ruled that he breached Parliament's rules on sexual misconduct, but he won't appeal the decision. The former government whip was found to have inappropriately touched a woman without her consent in one of Parliament's bars last year. In a statement, he apologised for any upset caused to the woman involved, adding that he didn't intend to cause any distress. Bell stood down at the last election, but officials said he would have faced a long suspension if he were still an MP. The UK's gender pay gap has narrowed slightly, now down to 7% up to April 2024. That's according to new figures. It's a decline from 7.5% last year and a 25% drop over the past decade. Men's full-time median earnings, excluding overtime, is now £19.24 an hour, compared to £17.88 for women. Experts say the slow pace of change shows more work is needed. In other news now, a 26-year-old man has died while detained at a migrant removal centre in West Sussex. It comes less than 12 months after a 37-year-old Albanian man died while he was also being detained at Brook House. The detention centre near Gatwick Airport has faced severe criticism, with a public inquiry last year revealing a toxic culture and degrading treatment of detainees, including incidents of violence and racism. Charities have condemned the conditions, likening the centre to a prison. In Gaza, the number of people killed in an Israeli strike on a town in the north has risen to at least 90 people, according to reports. Medics claim more than half of the dead were women and children, including a mother and her 5 children and a second mother with her 6 children. Israel has not yet commented on the latest strike. Local resident Ismail Kouda is among those searching for survivors believed to still be trapped under the rubble.
This is the house of the Abu Nassar family. It's been bombed. Lots of people were living in the house. There are tens of bodies. There was no warning.
And with a week to go until Election Day, the race is on in the swing states. Kamala Harris paused her rally to confront protesters, while Donald Trump pushed back against comparisons to Nazis, calling the claims disgusting.
And then they say, he's a Nazi. I'm not a Nazi. I'm the opposite of a Nazi.
It's after Trump's event drew backlash from opponents, with critics likening the atmosphere to a 1939 Nazi event at the same venue. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Now let's get stuck into the show. And very shortly, Donald Trump will give a press conference as we are just 1 week away from the presidential election. That is a week today, November the 5th. And we can now show you live shots of Mar-a-Lago, where this live press conference is set to take place. Donald Trump already fashionably over 1 hour late. What will be on the menu of discussion today? Well, to talk about that, I'm joined in the studio by the chief political correspondent at The Times, Aubrey Allegretti. Aubrey, welcome to the show. What do you think is going to be talked about today? There's been a huge backlash, of course, after the Madison Square Garden event. The comedian who spoke about Puerto Rico being a floating island of garbage. Now, that's had a significant impact. You'd imagine Kamala Harris and the Democrat team making hay out of that. But more significantly today, Angel Citron, he's the chairman of Puerto Rico's Republican Party, threatened to withdraw his support from Donald Trump's campaign unless there's a full apology. What started as a really poor joke has now become a rather serious diplomatic incident.
Certainly, and I suspect that this might be a case of damage limitation for the Trump campaign. Obviously, Donald Trump himself didn't make these comments, but they were made on a platform and in an arena where people were gathering to hear him and members of his family speak. And so this obviously is a very unwelcome distraction ahead of Election Day, when we know from the nationwide polls that things are so tight that it's about turnout for both supporters to try and get their people to the polls. And anything like this, which distracts attention from Trump's key messages, which are intended to drive that turnout, particularly on issues like migration and the southern border security, that is not welcome for him.
And ordinarily, Donald Trump wouldn't be drawn on such fripperies. He would see them, it's just a throwaway comment. But unusually, a senior Trump advisor has said this joke does not reflect the views of President Trump or the campaign. They've been forced onto a back foot, and it's been called completely classless, racist, and rhetoric that does not reflect GOP values. This is from prominent Republicans themselves. They're feeling concerned because this is a serious, unwarranted own goal.
I think they realise the potential damage that can be done. And in a race of such fine margins, you cannot afford missteps this close to polling day, particularly those which are seemingly unforced. And so I suspect the Trump campaign will be doing as much as possible to distance itself from these comments so that this row will go away, much like expecting, I suppose, Kamala Harris to jump on them to try and use this to drive, concerns about whether or not Donald Trump is suitable for office. We saw that she did that immediately in the aftermath of the former senior military advisor who said that Donald Trump had sort of fascistic tendencies. She came out immediately with a big statement just outside the vice president's residence and condemned it completely equivocally. It then led a lot of the news bulletins. I think her team will be wondering, how to make the most of this and really sort of hammer that message home. So he will be trying to see that off.
And yet, if you look at the money, at any rate, it seems to be rallying behind Donald Trump. He's the shortest odds to win this presidential race that he's ever been at any presidential race. It's currently 4-7. That's the shortest ever odds. And that includes 2016, his own stock, Trump Media. And, of course, all bets are on that. If he wins, then Truth Social, his platform, will be output through this. And there's been a 275% monthly increase in the stock price of that, 17% up today. So the money seems to be going onto Trump.
Certainly, yeah, the polling seems almost on a knife edge, but the betting markets are obviously sort of fluctuating and adjusting to where they expect the result will land in just under a week now, or rather just in a week. I'm going to be in Arizona for the US election, so he seems to be doing quite well in that state. He's pulled about 2 points ahead of Kamala Harris and seems to have retained that lead for the last week or so. So if he can hoover up those sort of votes in the Sun Belt, they'll be particularly advantageous to him. But Pennsylvania is the state where both candidates have been spending a lot of time. There is apparently a significant Puerto Rican community there. So again, the question is this sort of really damaging a very sort of core audience who are important to being able to get the vote out for Trump next week?
And as you say, there are 7 swing states. Arizona, you mentioned, pulling ahead. Pennsylvania, as you said, all eyes are on. That's why this is such a significant faux pas, where the Puerto Rican vote could be enough to sway it. I mean, you're talking about, such thin margins of victory, thousands of votes across entire states. Perhaps that is why they're treating this with such seriousness today, Aubrey.
Yeah, certainly. And again, I think there were some who were questioning whether there was an element of hubris in the Madison Square Gardens address, because people were saying in the run-up to it, this is, a strong red presence in a traditionally blue state. And so if Trump manages to pull it off in a week, we might all be saying the reverse, and actually that this was, the thing that really swung it for him, because it was so clear to see the big support turning out for him in a major metropolis. So whether or not actually this does him any damage is yet to slightly be seen. But certainly in this period where people are still early voting and considering their options, there are still lots of undecided voters. Anything you do like this that puts people off is not a good thing.
Super. Thank you very much for joining us, Aubrey Allegretti. And I'm also now joined by the Democratic strategist and the former spokesperson for Barack Obama, Federico de Jesus. Welcome, Federico. Thank you for joining us on the show. So all eyes there on this Trump press conference now, well over an hour late. Hey, it is Donald Trump. What do you think is going to be on the menu today? We were just talking in the studio here in London, in Westminster, about there's a rearguard action from the Trump team regarding those Puerto Rican comments made at Madison Square Garden. Do you expect that to feature greatly today?
He'll definitely get asked. He was quoted earlier today saying that he didn't know the comedian, he didn't watch the controversy, and he doesn't know who invited him. But the Bulwark and NBC News reported here in the U.S. that the comedian ran by the campaign his remarks, and they even struck comment that he was going to make about Kamala Harris using the C word, which I'm not allowed to use on the air. So this is not the first time that Trump or his associates insult Puerto Ricans or other Latinos. And there are 600,000 of Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania, all of them who are U.S. citizens. So this could be key. And I agree with your colleague from the Times that anything on the margins could tilt the election.
Do you think this will have an impact, though? I mean, it wasn't Donald Trump that said the comments. Of course, his opponents will jump on anything. They've been calling him Hitler. They've been calling him a white supremacist. They've been calling him a racist for years. So in that sense, there's nothing new with the attacks upon Donald Trump. It wasn't actually said by him. Do you think the vast majority of people would put it down to where it comes from and it won't actually affect the way they vote?
Well, it's been 48 hours and Donald Trump hasn't disavowed the comments, just like he didn't disavow David Duke. And yes, it's not the first time he's been accused of being a racist, but it's also not the first time that he's insulted Puerto Ricans. And yes, he did not make the comments himself, but the fact that the campaign knew about it beforehand and let it go anyway is very telling. And look, the solid, objective analysis is that Puerto Ricans that are already for Trump will probably be unfazed by this. I've spoken to some of them here in the States that aren't withdrawing their support from Trump, but anti-Trump Puerto Rican voters that may have been soft on Kamala Harris are now more motivated to go out and vote. And again, in a state like Pennsylvania where Biden won by 80,000 votes, having a block of 600,000 people from the island of Puerto Rico, many of whom are very upset at the Trump campaign for this, could make the difference. And it happened on the same day that Kamala Harris was unveiling her policy on the island of Puerto Rico, which is a U.S. territory or a colony. It's an island nation. And so Puerto Ricans are very proud of their national identity. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, have been in the States for almost 30 years, and can attest to the anger that's out there. And again, the way that Trump treated us after Hurricane Maria lets us know that his inner circle believes the type of thing that supposed comedian said on Sunday.
And is it significant that the island's chairman of the Republican Party, Angel Cintron, he's come out and said he's withdrawn his support from the Republican Party, but he has said if a full apology is granted, then he'll forgive and he'll kiss and make up. You think that is likely of a significant number of Puerto Ricans who will put it down to a slip of the tongue by somebody else, and if all goes well today, then that vote can be wooed back, because we have seen significant gains amongst the Latino vote for Trump, haven't we?
We have, and I have to say, as a lifelong Democrat who, as you said, worked for Barack Obama and his campaign administration, I have to respect how Donald Trump brought in Puerto Rican artists. He rightly referred to Puerto Rico as a country and was more culturally attuned to Latino and Puerto Rican men. Having said that, what he did on Sunday, his campaign, brought up people like Bad Bunny, like Ricky Martin, other activists in support of Kamala Harris, her plan on Puerto Rico. And I was actually debating Angel Cintron last night on Puerto Rican television, and he said that Puerto Rico comes first, and that if there is no apology, he will not vote for Donald Trump, even though Puerto Ricans on the island don't vote. They have a symbolic vote for president for the first time, and people in the States pay attention to what happens in the island. So again, any vote on the margin will make a difference. And with 600,000 Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania, a state that was won by a very thin margin by Biden, any difference in activating people who are, I have to say, a lot of anti-Trump Puerto Ricans were on the fence or maybe not that motivated. and some of them are. Will that make the difference? We'll have to see, right? And it also depends on whether Kamala Harris invests money in getting out the vote for Puerto Ricans, which hasn't been done before this weekend when she unveiled that plan. So a lot of moving parts, but this could be a key change in the dynamics in that state. And by the way, in North Carolina, Georgia, and Wisconsin, and in Michigan, there are more than hundreds of thousands of Puerto Ricans. So this isn't just a Pennsylvania play, and it's just not in Florida in the Senate race.
May I ask you, Federico, about that transition from, we've always heard in America that the Latino vote, the black vote, the ethnic minority vote, for these crude assumptions, typically went to the Democratic Party, but there has been a shift towards Donald Trump. What do you think has driven that?
There has been a shift in African-American men and Latino men. I think that it has to do with the economic impact of inflation and how Donald Trump himself ironically managed the pandemic, but people associate the closure of businesses during that time with Democrats. I think it also has to do with the fact that underground, despite all the racism and prejudice coming out from Donald Trump, he is connecting in a way with men in particular, and minority men specifically, in a culturally competent way that Democrats haven't before. Having said that, the polls coming out from Voto Latino Hispanic Federation show that there's been a change. Kamala Harris was at a ceiling of 59% with Latinos, which is historically low, given that Biden got 63%, Obama got 72%. But recently, there have been polls by those organizations saying that Latinos are at 64% for Kamala Harris. I don't think that's enough yet, and every little bit counts, and she needs to invest the money in getting out the vote. And this, again, could be a sea change. And Puerto Ricans really, really care about our national pride, regardless of politics, and this could make the difference.
Absolutely fascinating insight. Thank you so much for giving that to us. It really, really helps us this side of the pond to understand what is the greatest political show on earth. Federico de Jesus, thank you for joining us on GB News. Excellent. Thank you very much. Now, don't go anywhere, because we'll have all the latest from Mar-a-Lago and all the build-up to the budget tomorrow. In just a moment, I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. Oh, no, hang on a sec. No, Donald Trump, anticipated speech is expected any moment now. He's stepping up. Huge controversy, of course, after those comments, as Federico just said, about the fallout with the Puerto Rican vote. 600,000 Puerto Ricans in a huge swing state. All eyes on what Donald Trump is going to say at this press conference. Hugely anticipated. The election could be on the line. The election could be on the line. Donald Trump is stepping up, many fear, fighting for his political life here. He's about to deliver what could be a key address. As we just said, tens of thousands decided Pennsylvania, 600,000 Puerto Rican voters in this one state alone. We have an incident Donald Trump is expected to come out and face head on. Can he woo back that vote? As we were just saying, Puerto Rico's chairman pulled out support. Here's Donald Trump about to speak now. Here we go.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Such great spirit. I want to start by saying it's going very well. There are some bad spots in Pennsylvania where some serious things have been caught or in the process of being caught, but the election itself is going very well. We're leading, I believe, in all 7 swing states. So I appreciate everybody's work, and the spirit is unbelievable. I don't think there's ever been anything like it in our country's history, frankly, because we want to see our country get better. And that's why we're here, just to do a statement. And it's an honor to have some of our friends here. In less than 4 years, Kamala Harris has obliterated our borders, obliterated. We've never had a situation like this. Decimated the middle class, and runaway inflation has caused problems, the likes of which we never thought possible. Bloodshed, squalor to our cities is common. And they've unleashed a war and chaos all over the world. You take a look, everything's blowing up or getting ready to blow up. No respect for our country anymore, no respect for our leadership. No person has caused so much destruction and death at home and abroad should ever be allowed to be the President of the United States. Can't have that. Can't have that. So I'm running on a plan to save America. We're going to save America. We have no choice. It's the greatest there is. We love it, and we're going to save it. We have no choice. And it's going to be saving it from the incredible destruction that's been caused by crooked Joe Biden and Kamala. And she's responsible because he wasn't responsible, and she never said that. He didn't know too much about what was happening. Maybe that was exposed during the debate. And yet still the way they took that away from him was not right. It wasn't right. Shouldn't have happened that way. They walked in, they said, we're taking it away. They stole the presidency of the United States. You can call it a coup, you can call it whatever, but they stole it. They went in like taking candy from a baby, and can't have that. And she's running on a campaign of demoralization and really a campaign of destruction. But really, perhaps more than anything else, it's a campaign of hate. It's a campaign of absolute hate. And, you know, I said yesterday that she's a vessel. She is a vessel. It's a very big, powerful party with smart people. I have to be smart. But it's vicious. They're vicious, and they're perhaps even trying to destroy our country. Because who would want open borders where millions of people can flow in from prisons and from gangs, the worst gang members anywhere in the world? Who would want this for our country? Who would want all of these transgender operations all over the place, like at will? Even if you're in detention, I want a transgender. These are things she stood for. Who wants to defund the police? She's wanted her whole career to defund the police. She only changed recently. She changed on 15 different items. Fracking. She was against fracking at the highest level. Wouldn't even think about it. Now all of a sudden, oh, I'd like fracking very much. But they change after the election in about 2 minutes, and I think Pennsylvania understands that. After 2 assassination attempts in just over 3 months, her lies and her slanders are very shameful and really inexcusable. And I can say that if I were president and somebody was being threatened, openly threatened like they've threatened me, I would say, if you do that, even if this was an opponent who I disliked, if you do that, we will obliterate your entire country, and it would all stop. But they wouldn't make that statement. They won't make that statement. And essentially, that statement has been made by other presidents, even concerning their opponents, as you know. Today, we're going to talk about the real character of Kamala, and a person who has no remorse for the anguish she's inflicted upon families all across America. On the contrary, I have to tell you, Kamala intends to conflict and keep this misery going, and she's going to keep it going as long as she can, because that's the only way she can get elected. She's going out and only criticizing, talking about Hitler and Nazi, and because her record's horrible. Her borders are the worst in the history of the world. There's never been a border in the world like this. I always say in third world countries, banana republics, they'd fight them away with sticks and stones if they had to. We let them come in, come on in. Knowing in many cases they're murderers, they're drug lords, they're traitors in so many ways to our country. If they were involved in our country at all, even that, they're coming back in. People that left because they were traitors are coming back in. Everybody's coming back in. And it's at a level that we've never seen before. Criminals off the streets. And you know, other countries from where they're coming are now setting records, good records for them, where crime is down 70 and 75% because they're taking the criminals off the street. They're emptying their jails into our country. And they're not finished yet. I'm amazed. I thought they would have done it by now, but if you take a look at Venezuela, their crime is way, way, way down. then you go to Caracas and you wouldn't recognize it. You can actually walk the streets without being shot or killed or mugged. It's becoming a safe city because they've taken all their criminals, most of them, the rest are coming. They're all coming. They've taken their drug dealers and they've put them into the United States of America. Thank you very much, Kamala. I appreciate it. But she continues, and she will continue this misery, and her policies have caused such harm and such pain. And the three great people up here with me are going to just discuss that for a little while about what's happened to them, how their lives have been shattered. I'd like to begin with the story of one mother whose life Kamala has utterly destroyed this life. And we're talking about thousands of people.
And that's Donald Trump there delivering a hugely anticipated press conference at Mar-a-Lago. Anybody expecting Donald Trump to be apologetic for the Puerto Rico comments has been very, very disappointed. He came out fighting here, rather dulcet, muted, sombre, serious tone, talking of bloodshed, squalor in American cities, war that has been unleashed by Joe Biden, crooked Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. He accused of causing so much death and destruction abroad. We cannot have her being our president. We cannot allow that to happen. They stole the presidency. He continued with that line. She's running in a campaign of destruction and absolute hate, saying that's all they have left now, calling me a Nazi, comparing me to Adolf Hitler. She is vicious. He say they're perhaps even trying to destroy our country. Who wants these endless transgender operations, even in schools? He said, who wants to defund the police? Who wants to stop fracking? The answer is Kamala Harris. And then he talked about 2 assassination attempts, the rhetoric ramping up. The real character of Kamala Harris we will discuss today. She shows no remorse for the pain she has unleashed upon this country. There has never been a border like this. We used to beat people away with sticks, he said, to keep our country safe. Now we've thrown open the borders. We are a banana republic, a country full of murderers, criminals, drug dealers and gangs from countries like Venezuela that are now safe thanks to the emptying of foreign jails. Now, we're moving on. We're joined now by GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White, who can give us an update on the Southport stabbing incident. Mark, over to you.
Well, a very significant development in the Southport attacks, with new information coming through on the key suspect, Axel Raducubano, with 2 new charges that have been laid against the alleged attacker in those Southport stabbings, in which 3 young girls were killed and 10 other people were injured with knife-related injuries. This is what the Merseyside Chief Constable told us just a short time ago.
Today, the Crown Prosecution Service has authorised Axel Raducubano, aged 18, from Lancashire, to be charged with 2 further offences. Axel Raducubano already faces 3 charges of murder, 10 charges of attempted murder and 1 charge of possession of a knife, all relating to the incident at Hart Street on the 29th of July 2024. The 2 further offences relate to evidence obtained by Merseyside Police during searches of Axel Raducubano's home address as part of a lengthy and complex investigation which has been ongoing since the 29th of July. The additional charges are the production of a biological toxin, namely ricin, contrary to Section 1 of the Biological Weapons Act 1974, and possession of information, namely a PDF file entitled Military Studies in the Jihad Against the Tyrants, the Al-Qaeda Training Manual, likely to be useful to a person committing or preparing to commit an act of terrorism, contrary to Section 58 of the Terrorism Act 2000. Raducubano will appear at Westminster Magistrates Court by video link tomorrow. Following announcement of further charges, Today, I want to reassure the communities of Southport and the communities of Merseyside that we are committed to getting justice for the families of Bibi, Elsie and Alice, the 10 victims who were injured at Hart Street and the other 16 people who were present on that day. We are also committed to being open and transparent with our communities. However, I am sure you will appreciate that we also need to make sure that we do not prejudice this trial. You may have seen speculation online that the police are deciding to keep information from the public. This is certainly not the case. We have been given extensive guidance by the Crown Prosecution Service in relation to what we can say publicly to ensure the integrity of the court proceedings are protected. And therefore we are restricted in what we can share with you now the proceedings are live. Following the events of Monday the 29th of July, searches of Axel Rudikabarna's home address resulted in an unknown substance being found. Testing confirmed the substance as ricin. We have worked extensively with partners to establish that there was a low to very low risk to the public, and I want to make that reassurance clear today. I can also tell you that there was no ricin present at Hart Street. When ricin was discovered, all necessary steps were taken so that we could be sure that no one was at risk. This was a multi-agency response. Expert advice and guidance was received and adhered to throughout the investigation. In the days following, Merseyside Police worked extensively with our partners, including Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service, North West Ambulance Service, Sefton Council, West Lancashire Borough Council, Counter-Terrorism Policing North West, Counter-Terrorism Policing Headquarters, the UK Health Security Agency, the Crown Prosecution Service, NHS England, the National CBRN Centre, the Defence Science and Technology Laboratory and the Ministry of Defence to identify if there was any risk to victims, local communities and specialist professionals in attendance at Hart Street and Old School Close. At this point, it's particularly appropriate to recognise the support that we've had from our colleagues in the emergency services, local authorities and counter-terrorism policing. That support has included forensic experts and digital investigators, and that support has been in place since the initial stages of the investigation and continues. I want to reassure our communities that we will continue to work in partnership with all of our partners, and we are absolutely committed to keeping our communities safe. At this time, counter-terrorism policing has not declared the events of the 29th of July a terrorist incident. I recognise that these new charges may lead to speculation. The matter for which Axel Rudikabarna has been charged under the Terrorism Act does not require motive to be established. For a matter to be declared as a terrorist incident, motivation would need to be established. I would strongly advise anyone against speculating as to the motivation in this case. The criminal proceedings against Axel Rudikabarna are live and he has a right to a fair trial. It is extremely important that there is no reporting, commentary or sharing of information online that could prejudice these proceedings. I want to remind everyone that the trial is scheduled for January next year. Since the 29th of July, my officers and staff have been working diligently in conjunction with colleagues from counter-terrorism, and they are continuing to assess evidential material which we have recovered to ensure all the evidence is available to the Crown Prosecution Service and the details of the case will come out in court. My plea is to be patient. Don't engage in rumour and speculation. Don't believe everything you read on social media. We must not lose sight of the families of Elsie, Bibi and Alice who are still grieving, and the families and those victims who were present at Hart Street on the 29th of July. We need to do the right thing to ensure that the justice process is not prejudiced.
Well, the Merseyside Chief Constable there with a very significant new announcement regarding the chief suspect now facing criminal charges in relation to the Southport attack, facing 2 additional charges. Those charges you heard the Chief Constable say regarding the production of the deadly toxin ricin, traces of which were found in the suspect's home in the days after the Southport attacks, and then also information that the suspect had downloaded a PDF of an Al-Qaeda training manual, a jihadist training manual, likely to be of use to anyone preparing acts of terrorism. This is an offence under the Terrorism Act 2000. But at this stage, the Chief Constable at pains to point out that they are not declaring the Southport attacks as a terrorist attack because they have not yet established a motivation. They are cautioning, as you heard there, against any kind of speculation, given that this case now is very active. The suspect has been charged. He will appear at Westminster Magistrates Court in West London tomorrow to face the 2 additional new charges, and then of course a trial in January. So given all that, the Chief Constable here in Liverpool urging the public not to speculate but just to deal with the facts. These 2 new significant charges that have been laid against Axel Rudikabanu.
Thank you, Mark Wyatt. A significant development in the case of Axel Rudikabanu. Just to repeat, the first one, the production of ricin. The second, the possession of a PDF manual of military studies in the jihad against the tyrants, the Al-Qaeda training manual. Thank you, Mark Wyatt, for that significant update live there from Liverpool. And of course, we'll bring you all the very latest on that update on the Southport stabbings update later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
The former royal correspondent for the Sun newspaper, Charles Ray. Good to see you this morning, Charles, and so good to see Catherine back to work with a hug.
It is. It's fantastic. I mean, there are a few royal jobs that touch at the heartstrings, and this is certainly one of those. And I think it's the first time we've actually seen Catherine back in a royal duty since she herself confirmed that she'd finished chemotherapy.
Done so much, haven't they, the Princess of Wales and the King, to raise awareness for these cancers.
Here we have both the King and Catherine having, explained to the nation and the rest of the world that they were battling or are still battling cancer, just like everyone else.
How sincere is all of this? I mean, it looks it looks like she's a wonderful, kind, caring woman, but I don't know. I've never met her.
Well, she is a wonderful, kind, caring woman. That is without a shadow of a doubt. And William heard about this young lady on a visit to the air ambulance, and they invited her because she's a photographer, so she wanted to take. She has a bucket list and wanted to take pictures of an investiture. I mean, make no mistake. People like Catherine are just absolutely wonderful in what they do and how they do it. I mean, and Catherine is the superstar of the royal family. Of that, there is no doubt.
It's the cockles of my heart, Charles. It really does. It's really good to see you. Thanks very much.
All the
Thanks,
best.
Charles. Thanks. And Liz, who is this 16-year-old amateur photographer who was hugged by Princess of Wales yesterday, has said it was a dream come true.
I bet it was.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about.
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry
Tonight is electric.
As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Budget Day on GB News tomorrow. Stay with us all day for the most anxiously anticipated budget in a generation.
Morning through to evening, we'll be here with insight and analysis, crunching the numbers
as we work out the cost to the country and, most importantly, to you.
Because the Chancellor has a bill to pay. The question is...
who's going to pay it? Budget Day, tomorrow on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Budget Day on GB News tomorrow. Stay with us all day for the most anxiously anticipated budget in a generation.
Morning through to evening, we'll be here with insight and analysis, crunching the numbers
as we work out the cost to the country and, most importantly, to you.
Because the Chancellor has a bill to pay. The question is...
who's going to pay it? Budget Day, tomorrow on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 3:43. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, EasyJet has launched a new campaign to recruit more veterans to its workforce, with the company saying it valued the skills gained in the forces. And the airline has joined forces with best-selling author Andy McNabb to support the launch of We Served, a new online platform designed to help veterans apply for jobs including aircraft engineering and even cabin crew. Well, joining us down the line to discuss EasyJet's flight decision is the Royal Tank Regiment veteran James Cameron. James, welcome to the show. Huge fan of yours, and I'm guessing you're a huge fan of this. What veterans need is a helping hand back into the workforce, and I'm sure you'll be welcoming this move from EasyJet today.
It's fantastic to hear, it really is. We, as a nation, have invested a huge amount in these people who've served the Crown, and if we don't harness their wonderful abilities afterwards, then we're overlooking a strategic national asset. And I think what EasyJet have done by recognising the value that veterans bring, it's win-win. It's great for the country. It's great for the company, and orange-tailed aircraft. And it's brilliant for men who've served like that gentleman in the Rifles, who's now going to be part of keeping that fleet in the air and keeping happy holidaymakers getting to their destinations.
And there are also a whole raft of other corporations and organisations who do similar work. I know Land Rover, Jaguar do similar scheme, right? There's the Armed Forces Covenant. Over 12,000 organisations have signed up to that. James, tell us the types of skills and the type of moral character that veterans have that make them so useful and valuable to companies.
Well, we're very proud. My day job these days is running a charity now under the Mission Community banner. It was actually an Invictus Games legacy piece from 2014 that saw Jaguar Land Rover formalise their armed forces engagement piece by bringing together an armed forces community network within the company. Some 9.5 years on, as we've been helping run that programme within Jaguar Land Rover, they recently announced that they'd hired 1,500 veterans since the 1st of January 2015. And what does that mean to the company? They're importing people who've got a different life story than the rest of the civilian world. People who have served the nation, have stood up in order to be counted, but also have got a huge amount to give after they leave the armed forces. Our armed forces are very much a pyramid demographic. You need a lot of Toms on the ground running around, getting wet and dirty, doing those things, and you need relatively very few generals. So at every stage in military service, the armed forces need to bring in young people and shed them as they go. And for any organisation which is growing and which is looking to bring in talent, instead of just looking to our schools or universities for how they can bring that in, bringing across somebody mid-career who's already had a life and a value system which has been forged in the armed forces. They've got an awful lot to bring across when they come across into companies. People like JLR have been absolutely fabulous examples of exactly that.
And James, what a lot of people don't understand, of course, is that people come out of the armed forces relatively young, a bit like footballers in many senses. They have their whole lives ahead of them in many ways. But of course, if they start young, they can come out quite young too. Still got a lot to give, James Cameron. We hear so many bad news stories about life after the armed forces. Isn't it wonderful just to provide these networks, to give people the foot up they deserve? And as you say, if you're prepared to pay the ultimate price and risk your life and everything for your country, surely, then you're going to risk everything you have to help a company that has that belief in you.
Absolutely. And of course, service leavers range from anything from 18 years old, early service leavers, so perhaps those who are leaving not on timing of their own choosing, having fallen by the wayside in training, through to the age of 55, but predominantly they're younger. But of course, they also leave with families who are often relocating as well. Every year, there's around 15,000 service leavers from all three services that leave through a thing called a Career Transition Partnership. It is a government-let contract. It's in its first month of being delivered by a new and energetic provider, Reed in Partnership. That's paid for by you and I as taxpayers. And so for companies to realise that it's free for them to sign up for these things, to put their opportunities in front of those service leavers is really important. But if you can harness the families as well, those families often have members where their CVs don't reflect a selfish pursuit of their own individual goals. Their lives too have been impacted by military service. And what that means is they can be a fantastic source of incredible talent that perhaps otherwise could easily be overlooked. So huge credit to EasyJet for companies that sign the covenant and for those that lean into doing these things. It is, I think it's only right and fitting that we help these people who've served the country be part of our national fabric in all aspects of our lives.
Superb. It's a fantastic story and how positive as we approach Armistice Day, of course. Always an absolute delight to have you on the show, James Cameron, Royal Tank Regiment veteran. Thank you very much. You take care, my son. Lovely. Now, there's yet more bad news for Sir Keir Starmer as he suffers the biggest fall in approval ratings of any Prime Minister in the modern era, because Sir Keir's personal rating has fallen to minus 38 points, as you can see it there, going off the proverbial cliff edge. And that, of course, is one day before the bad news budget. So this could get even worse by tomorrow. I haven't seen anyone fall off this bad since Ten Hag at Man United. Nice joke there to get the Man United fans revved up. Now, we're joined by the research manager at More in Common, who conducted this poll, Ed Hodgson. Ed, welcome to the show. It's an unprecedented approval ratings plunge, simply gone off a cliff. Tell us more.
Yeah, it really is quite shocking. I think the important place to start is just actually how well Keir Starmer was doing just after the general election. He only had a plus 11 approval rating, but that actually made him essentially the most popular politician in the country, because it was at a time when all politicians were extremely unpopular. The issue is now, he's now among the least popular politicians in the country. And the reason for that really is he came in on this big promise of change and the public just don't think that he's delivered on it.
Well, there has been change and he's gone off a cliff. I mean, you can't get much more of a change than that. In fact, Sir Keir Starmer's popularity is now lower than Rishi Sunak's now. Rishi Sunak's got about 3 days left as leader of the Conservatives, way below Tony Blair. He was still riding on the crest of that optimistic wave in 1997. There's something particularly grim in the runes here for Sir Keir Starmer. I also saw with interest in this More in Common report the actual polling for the parties themselves. We've got the Conservatives and Labour Party neck and neck on 27. Reform, meanwhile, rising to their highest ever of 21%, Ed.
Yeah, it's pretty extraordinary. And actually, if you ask the public, who would you rather be the government now? And if you think back to just a couple months ago when the public were extremely critical of our Conservative government, they also had record low polling figures. Well, if you ask the public now who they'd rather be the government, it's essentially neck and neck. And actually, the Conservatives slightly edge with the public saying they'd rather the Conservatives be in power now. So it is really remarkable. I think there's an interesting data point that comes underneath this, which is if you ask the government, if you ask the public, do you think the current government feels different, or do they feel like more of the same? 65% of people say they feel like more of the same, and that includes 45% of people who voted for the Labour Party this year. So there's a real sense that this government has not changed the country for the better. In fact, 70% of people say things are getting worse, which is the highest we've ever seen.
And Ed, a poll yesterday told us that 78% of the public think that politicians are simply in it for themselves. Do you get an appetite here, Ed Hodgson, for change, or is the currency one of apathy?
Yeah, I mean, this is the most worrying thing to me, I think. You can look at these bad poll numbers for Labour, and they are really bad for Labour, but it's a bigger issue for the country. If Labour tomorrow in their budget are unable to sort of create a sense that politicians can change things for the better, it's really worrying. We find that only 30% of the country think British democracy works, and only a fifth think that politicians are up to the challenges that the country faces. So there's a real risk that if government is unable to turn things around and shift this mood, you'll see people much more dramatically move towards sort of non-mainstream parties and lose trust in politics altogether.
Is there anything in this idea, sort of quick minute here, Ed, that all the bad news will be out of the way quickly and we'll soon get back to business as normal? Or do you think actually this is signs of a deeper ennui, a deeper rot?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's what the government is hoping for, and their sense from what they say is that we need to make these tough decisions now and then they can build back in the future. The truth is, though, no government or politician has ever had that sort of recovery and approval rating. I can't think of any example of a leader at minus 38% in approval ratings that becomes positive within 5 years. So it will be a really significant uphill battle. And if Starmer's able to do that, it will be sort of a historic achievement. The truth is that the government has been on a quite heavy expectations management exercise with this budget. You ask people sort of what they think about the budget, how they feel. The top words they tell us in our polling are nervous, worried, scared. And that's not normal for a budget. People normally, politically disengaged people in particular, don't think about budgets that much, and nor should they. They should trust the government that things are going to be okay and that they'll look after the country's finances. So there's a real risk that this pessimism increases rather than gets better for the government over the next few years.
OK, absolutely fascinating report there from More in Common, and that is Ed Hodgson. Thank you very much for joining us on GB News. Now, plenty more coming up for the next hour, including all the latest as we build up to the Chancellor's budget tomorrow. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. But now it's time for your weather, and here's On a Critic.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Quite a cloudy afternoon on offer, largely dry, and there are also some brighter spells, particularly in southern and eastern areas. And where you catch that brighter weather, it is feeling mild for the time of year. We've currently got a cold front clearing the southeast of the country, and that's allowing a ridge of high pressure to build elsewhere. So as we head into the evening, there's going to be plenty of dry and fine weather around, a mix of cloud and some clearer spells. That cloud will be thick enough to produce some spots of rain and drizzle at times, and also where we see those clearer skies, we'll see some mist and fog developing, which may be rather stubborn to clear by the time we reach the morning. Feeling a little chillier under those prolonged clear spells, but for many it's a rather mild night on offer. As we head through into Wednesday morning then, a fairly cloudy start across much of Scotland, perhaps some clearer spells across the Northern Isles, but can't rule out the risk of a shower. Similar across Northern Ireland, Northern England, a fairly cloudy start to tomorrow. That cloud once again thick enough to produce some drizzle, this mainly around hilly areas. And similar across the rest of England and Wales, a mix of cloud and some clearer spells and some pockets of mist and fog around to start the day too. But otherwise, that high pressure generally building, leaving plenty of fine, settled weather. Similar day to today, where we'll see a mix of cloud and some brighter spells at times. But on the whole, it is going to be largely dry. Perhaps some rain and showers just moving into the far Northern Isles as we head into the afternoon. Slight dip in those temperatures, but still widely above average for the time of year. So still pleasant for this time in October. Through into the evening, we'll see another fairly similar evening, really. Once again, a mix of that cloud and those clear spells, and likely to see some mist and fog develop once again, and still with those outbreaks of rain moving into Orkney and Shetland. And to end the week and to start the weekend, remaining fairly similar. Cloud with some bright spells, and just a slight dip in the temperatures as we head into the weekend.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M74 northbound in Glasgow due to an earlier vehicle fire at junction 1 for the M8. Slow for the M6 northbound in Lancashire. It's partially blocked for an accident between junction 31 Sammersbury and 31A for Longridge. We're also seeing slow traffic on the southbound carriageway due to onlookers. Queues on the M6 southbound in Cheshire. There's a lane closed for a broken down vehicle between junction 17 Sandbach and 16 Stoke-on-Trent. Slow for the M42 southbound in the West Midlands. The entry slip road is partially blocked for an accident at junction 5, the Solihull bypass. Also in the West Midlands, we're seeing queues on the M6 northbound. There's a lane closed for a broken down vehicle between junction 6 Spaghetti Junction and 7 Great Bar. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
We could be. It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, the 18-year-old accused of murdering 3 young schoolgirls in Southport and attempting to murder 10 others faces 2 new charges, and both of them are terror-related. Next up, Donald Trump speaks out against Kamala Harris as Election Day gets down to the wire, accusing her of being heartless and cold-blooded, a betrayal over our borders. Just 7 days to go now. Who is going to be the next president of the USA? And an astonishing new poll shows Sir Keir Starmer as the least popular Prime Minister in modern history, with his approval ratings absolutely tanking. He's down an astonishing 49 points since the general election. And meanwhile, Labour and the Tories are tied neck and neck on 27%, with Reform surging to 21%, their highest ever polling rating. And that's all coming up in your next hour. What was the show? Always a pleasure to have your company. It's been an astonishing first hour. Donald Trump, a lot of people expected him. He gave a press conference at Mar-a-Lago. A lot of people expected him to be on a back foot, apologising for those comments at Madison Square Gardens about Puerto Rico. He was anything but. He was defiantly attacking Kamala Harris, saying she is trying to destroy the country, calling her vicious, and a full-throated assault on his opponent in the presidential race. And meanwhile, new information has emerged on the Southport attacker. 2 new terror charges being faced, one on the production of ricin, a nerve agent, and the second one on possession of a PDF of an Al-Qaeda jihadi manual. What a day for news. We'll have full details on all of that. Get in touch with your views. gbnews.com/your say. But first, here's your headlines, and it's Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. It's just gone 4 o'clock. These are your headlines. First, to recap on that breaking news, the suspect in July's Southport stabbings, Axel Rudakabana, is facing 2 new charges today in connection with the attack on Hart Street in Southport on the 29th of July, which resulted in the deaths of 3 young girls. In addition to the existing charges of murder and attempted murder, the 18-year-old is now charged with producing the biological toxin ricin and possessing an Al-Qaeda training manual for potential terrorism preparation. He will appear via video link at a Westminster Magistrates Court tomorrow. Police maintain there was a low risk to the public and have denied keeping information from the public, urging against speculation on the suspect's motives to ensure a fair trial. The Chancellor says the NHS is the lifeblood of Britain, promising to reverse a decade of neglect and underinvestment, but she warns that a single budget can't undo 14 years of damage. It comes as Rachel Reeves is set to unveil a budget injecting billions into the NHS, funding 2 million more for appointments, with £1.5 billion aimed at new surgical hubs and scanners and £70 million for radiotherapy. However, speaking to us this morning, Health Secretary Wes Streeting admitted that significant improvements will take time.
What tomorrow's budget will give us the chance to do is arrest that decline and mark a turning point in the history of the NHS and in the decline we've seen over the last 14 years. Today what we're talking about is the delivery of our manifesto commitments to cut waiting lists. So the 40,000 more appointments every week we said as our first step, and we are already ramping up to those 40,000 more appointments.
Meanwhile, ahead of the budget tomorrow, Sir Keir Starmer has been told it is not too late to change his mind on winter fuel payment cuts, with Conservative MPs handing in a petition signed by 250,000 people. At this time of the year, more than 11 million pensioners would normally be receiving a letter from the Department for Work and Pensions confirming when their winter fuel allowance would be paid. Instead, the letters arriving this year are informing approximately 10 million pensioners they will not be getting their usual payment. Shadow Work and Pension Secretary Mel Stride had this message for the Labour government.
Scrap this means testing of the winter fuel payment, because it means 10 million pensioners losing out, and 2/3 of those pensioners below the poverty level will lose this benefit, and we don't believe that's right.
Now, former Conservative MP Aaron Bell says he's disappointed a watchdog's ruled that he breached Parliament's rules on sexual misconduct, but he won't appeal the decision. The former government whip was found to have inappropriately touched a woman without her consent in one of Parliament's bars last year. In a statement, he apologised for any upset caused to the women involved, adding that he didn't intend to cause any distress. Bell stood down at the last election, but officials said he would have faced a long suspension if he was still an MP. In other news, the UK's gender pay gap has narrowed slightly, now down to 7% up to April 2024, according to new figures. It's a decline from 7.5% last year and a 25% drop over the past decade. Men's full-time median earnings, excluding overtime, is now £19.24 an hour, compared to £17.88 for women. Experts say the slow pace of change shows more work needs to be done. And Donald Trump has been speaking at his Mar-a-Lago, Florida residence ahead of the US election. With a week to go, the race is on in the swing states. Despite keeping crowds waiting, he was greeted by chants of USA, USA. The Republican presidential candidate took a swipe at rival Kamala Harris, claiming she launched a coup to steal presidency from Joe Biden.
Me saving it from the incredible destruction that's been caused by crooked Joe Biden and Kamala. And she's responsible because he wasn't responsible, and she never said that. He didn't know too much about what was happening. Maybe that was exposed during the debate. And yet still the way they took that away from him was not right. It wasn't right. It shouldn't have happened that way. They walked in, they said, we're taking it away. They stole the presidency of the United States. You can call it a coup, you can call it whatever, but they stole it. They went in like taking candy from a baby.
Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Now, breaking news in this past hour, and the 18-year-old accused of murdering 3 young schoolgirls in Southport and attempting to murder 10 others has also now been charged with attempting to make a biological weapon using the deadly toxin ricin. And Axel Raducabana is also facing a second charge under the Terrorism Act, and that's possessing an Al-Qaeda terror manual. And for a full update on this breaking story, I'm now joined by GB News' Homeland Security Editor, Mark White, who can give us a full update on the Southport stabbing incident. Mark, over to you.
Well, it's now 3 months since the horrific events in Southport that led to the killing of 3 young innocent girls, 8 other girls injured and 2 adults injured in that attack as well. And now a very significant development with these 2 new charges, one a terrorist charge, the other relating to biological weapons. The discovery of the deadly toxin ricin in the home address of the terror suspect, Raducabana, and also that revelation that there was a PDF of a manual, an Al-Qaeda training manual that would have been useful to terrorists. That a charge under the Terrorism Act 2000. This is what the Merseyside Chief Constable told the press just an hour ago.
2 further offences relate to evidence obtained by Merseyside Police during searches of Axel Raducabana's home address as part of a lengthy and complex investigation which has been ongoing since the 29th of July. The additional charges are the production of a biological toxin, namely ricin, contrary to Section 1 of the Biological Weapons Act 1974, and possession of information, namely a PDF file entitled Military Studies in the Jihad Against the Tyrants, the Al-Qaeda Training Manual, likely to be useful to a person committing or preparing to commit an act of terrorism.
Well, of course, we know the terrible events of the 29th of July this year sparked a great deal of anger and led to violent disorder in a number of communities in England and in Northern Ireland. What we did not really get from Merseyside Police here today was an explanation as to why it has taken them so long, 3 months, to file these additional charges and to inform the public about these additional and clearly important additional charges that have been added to the indictment against Raducabana. But having said that, the Chief Constable acknowledged just how sensitive this whole issue is and urged for people not to speculate and to remain calm.
I would strongly advise anyone against speculating as to the motivation in this case. The criminal proceedings against Axel Raducabana are live and he has a right to a fair trial. It is extremely important that there is no reporting, commentary or sharing of information online that could prejudice these proceedings. I want to remind everyone that the trial is scheduled for January next year.
Well, while the Chief Constable there is calling for people not to speculate and to remain calm, it's also been confirmed to GB News that additional police resources have been brought in to Merseyside just in case there is an adverse reaction to the news that's come out from police headquarters today. As far as Axel Raducabana is concerned, he is due to appear by video link at Westminster Magistrates Court in West London tomorrow morning.
Thank you, Mark White, for that update live from Liverpool. The incredible case of Axel Raducabana facing 2 additional charges today under the Terror Act. Thank you, Mark White. Now, moving on, the Chancellor is set to announce her budget tomorrow, the first Labour one in 15 years. And ahead of this, we can now speak with GB News' political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, welcome to the show. But before we talk to about the budget, I believe you have a statement from Downing Street about that case of Axel Rutter-Cabana.
Yes, Martin, welcome to Downing Street on the eve of the budget, but right now all thoughts are turning to Southport and that dramatic press conference just half an hour ago. Since then, we've had a meeting with the lobby, where the lobby can question number 10 about current news events. The Prime Minister's deputy official spokesman has said this: it's important that we let the police and the CPS do their jobs and for a trial to establish the facts. Our focus is on ensuring that we get justice for the victims and their loved ones. We must let the police do their jobs and the trial establish the facts. The government is focused on ensuring the families and all those affected see justice. First and foremost, the Prime Minister's thoughts are with those families and the communities. His thoughts remain firmly with them. So there you have it, Downing Street, Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, just trying to focus back on the victims, just get the justice for them and then have a conversation about everything else. But for now, it's all about the victims, according to Downing Street.
Yeah, a huge amount of questions going to be asked, and Mark Wyatt saying there primarily why it took so long for these announcements to be made. But moving on, looking ahead to the budget tomorrow, this has been somewhat overshadowed, astonishingly now, by the Southport announcement. But everybody, it seems, Chris, left, right and centre, if you're from the world of business, if you're a pensioner, if you're a motorist, if you're a saver, if you're a landlord, even if you're a boozer or a smoker, everybody seems to be bracing themselves for bad news.
And that's because that's what we've been prepared for by both the Chancellor and by Sir Keir Starmer. We know bits of what's in the budget. We know that the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, will reset borrowing rules, allowing her to borrow up to £50 billion to spend on hospitals, roads, bridges, infrastructure and the like. We know some bits around the edges. We know that for those who rely on bus services, maybe in more rural parts of this country, that the capped fares go up from £2 to £3. We know that because Sir Keir Starmer told us that in Birmingham yesterday. There are reports today that we're going to see a big increase in the minimum wage. There could be more on that overnight. Currently it's £11.44 an hour. For those aged over 20, that might go to £12.20, according to the Times newspaper this morning. There's reports they want to bring up the younger rate, which is less, £8.60 an hour, bring it closer to where older people receive their money. This couldn't come soon enough, Martin. I've been saying to you for months now, this government needs a budget to get going, start its work, because the delay in having this budget has meant we've had weeks of rather silly row, I think, about what is a working person. We know this government has said it won't tax working people, so of course we'll be trying to find out for our viewers and listeners what is a working person, to find out how much more tax you might pay when we see this budget being announced tomorrow. We'll know everything within 24 hours. But in the meantime, though, Sir Keir Starmer has paid a political price for this delay. More in Common, a polling company, say that he's gone from a plus 11% approval rating 16 weeks ago at the time of the election to minus 33 points now. Difficult for him to land. The question now for this Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, his Chancellor, who works in the office behind me, 11 Downing Street, can this budget tomorrow lift those numbers and get this government back on an even keel and try and do what it wants to do?
Well, it would appear not. I mean, unless it's the best kept secret this side of the end of the planet, because this is the least popular Prime Minister in living memory. He's less popular than Rishi Sunak. He's only got about 3 days left in his job. Less popular than Tony Blair, of course, had a huge wave of optimism in the last Labour government we had. Things can only get better. We're fed a constant diet, are we not, Chris? But things will only get worse. Less popular than David Cameron when he hopped into bed with Nick Clegg. Less popular with Boris Johnson when he left office. It takes some doing to be this unpopular, but Sir Keir Starmer's done it.
Yeah, he has. I mean, he hasn't got going yet, really. I mean, you mentioned some previous people who lived in Downing Street, some prime ministers, they had a budget much sooner than after the election, than they've waited for so long. And that, I think, has meant we're really in the trailers. We haven't got even to the movie. That starts tomorrow. The narrative of this government starts tomorrow. The reason why we've waited for so long is because the Labour government's worried about spooking the markets. They've given 10 weeks for the Office for Budget Responsibility to check over the numbers, check that no one gets jumped or spooked like after the Liz Truss autumn statement, which did so much damage the Tory government's credibility in the markets. That's why we waited for so long, and that's part of the problem. That delay in having a budget means we don't really know the full tax and spend plans until very soon. We are expecting, though, an increase of between 1% and 2% in employers' national insurance, and it's quite notable that when the political cabinet met earlier today, that's to discuss politics rather than government measures earlier. Seeing who's arriving behind me there, but it's not a member of the government. But yes, we heard earlier from the political cabinet readout from the government. They're saying they will protect the pay slips of working people. What that means is that the pay slips won't change, your national insurance won't change that you pay if you're employed by a company, but the employer's contribution will go up. And the fear for many people, small companies and the like, are that increase in the employer's national insurance will get passed on to employees.
Well, if that's the trailer, as we build towards the main event on Halloween, it's sounding very much, Chris Hope, like a nightmare on Downing Street. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. Always an absolute pleasure. Let's move on. I can now speak with the founder of thepensionervote.com, David Pinless. David, welcome to the show. Always an absolute delight. Now, I know we've been speaking over these past weeks since that winter fuel allowance was cut. All eyes on what's going to be in the budget for pensioners tomorrow. But you've got us a very, very intriguing story about Labour parliamentarians and their so-called allegiances with elderly people. Tell us more.
OK, well, Patrick Christie's broke this story last week. And on the Age UK website, they present what they call a list of age champions. And there's a subset of that list called Age Champion MPs. Now, I donate regularly to Age UK, so I took a look at the website, and I was really surprised that on this list of Age Champion MPs, there are many MPs who actually voted to scrap the winter fuel allowance. So I asked myself, how can they reconcile that's a list up there, how can they reconcile scrapping the winter fuel allowance with being a so-called Age Champion? So just to make a couple of comments on this list, which you've grabbed a screenshot there for, looking at the first two, for example, we've got Anna Gelderd, who is the Labour MP for South East Cornwall. She's got a majority of under 2,000, but nearly 22,000 pensioners in her constituency will lose the winter fuel allowance. So I think she's going to lose her seat at the next election, isn't she? And then look at the second one on the list, Ben Goldsborough, who's a Labour MP for South Norfolk. He has a majority of under 3,000, but nearly 20,000 pensioners in his constituency are going to lose the winter fuel allowance. You probably can't scroll down a bit anymore there. I don't know if you can or not, but we've got some people with very tiny majorities. I'll tell you the most extreme one on the list, and that's Amanda Martin. She actually abstained from voting, and she's the Labour MP for Portsmouth North. She has a majority of under 1,000. And yet there are 14,000 pensioners in her constituency who are going to lose the winter fuel payment. So I have to ask myself, are they more concerned about losing the Labour whip than they are about pensioners losing their lives? So I compiled the list of these MPs. There are actually 17 MPs who are age champions who voted to scrap the winter fuel payment, and then a further 10, 27 in total, who abstained from voting. I wrote to all 27 of them. I have yet to receive a reply. And the list, you can find it on thepensionervote.com. Scroll down and you'll see a link to Age Champions. Now, I also wrote to Age UK, and they immediately responded with a very polite, detailed response that, again, is published on that webpage. And in a nutshell, it was rather weak, I think. They were saying, well, they do plenty of other good work as well. I don't really hold with that. If I were in charge of Age UK, that list of 27 would be off in a heartbeat. I mean, you can't, with any conscience, justify being an age champion and voting to scrap the winter fuel allowance.
I think that is the takeaway from this. It's an astonishing league shame of hypocrisy, in my opinion. How can you be an age champion at the same time vote for tens of thousands of pensioners to be colder and poorer this winter? And as you said, by Labour's own data in 2017, 4,000 deaths seems to be a price that they're prepared to pay. All eyes on the budget tomorrow. David Pinless, thanks for joining us as the founder there of the pensionervote.com. Always a pleasure. Thank you, David. Now, coming up, Donald Trump speaks out against Kamala Harris as Election Day gets down to the very final wire, accusing her of a heartless and cold-blooded betrayal over America's borders. Just 7 days to go now until the greatest political show on earth. Who will be the next president of the US of A? More on this next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
National Trust Director General has said something rather curious. She's admitted that 70% of the charity's staff are Union Jack-hating progressive activists. Yes, this was speaking at a Labour Party fringe event. The boss of the charity, Hilary McGrady, acknowledged that there was a gap between her staff's views and the views held by the wider public. So was she being honest? Joining me now to discuss this is historian and broadcaster Rafe Hadelman-Koo, who I believe is with me. Rafe, thank you very much indeed. Can this be true?
The founders of the National Trust and later figures involved in it, like my hero James Lees Milne, were really motivated by love of nation. But I think that love of nation in the Trust has become actively, national self-loathing. And that's really the state of modern Britain. And with the Trust, I mean, what we've done is we've actually entrusted our national heritage to those people who actually actively despise our national heritage. And it's, it's utter madness.
Have these people wanted to take over charities like the National Trust for their political ends, or is it just something that happens? Is it just the type of people who work in charities?
This has been part of the long march through the institutions, that people need to understand that Britain is now a post-revolutionary society. So the buildings that house our institutions look the same, but the people who now run them bear no comparison to the generations who lovingly built and ran them. They are cuckoos in the nest, and we need to understand that. And of course, once you realize that, of course, that explains completely why, the National Trust and others have crudely tried to denigrate our national heroes and link them and their houses to colonialism and slavery, as they ludicrously tried to do.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:26. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, earlier we heard from Donald Trump as the US election heats up, just 7 days away now. Let's have a quick listen to what he had to say.
The election itself is going very well. We're leading, I believe, in all 7 swing states. In less than 4 years, Kamala Harris has obliterated our borders, obliterated. We've never had a situation like this. Decimated the middle class, and runaway inflation has caused problems, the likes of which we never thought possible. Bloodshed, squalor to our cities is common, and they've unleashed a war and chaos all over the world. You take a look, everything's blowing up or getting ready to blow up. No respect for our country anymore, no respect for our leadership. No person has caused so much destruction and death at home and abroad should ever be allowed to be the President of the United States. You can't have that.
Well, that was Trump very much on a front foot. And joining me now is the Republican strategist and the former Republican Nevada State Party chairwoman, Amy Takanian. Amy, welcome to the show. A lot of people expected Donald Trump to be on a back foot today, maybe eating humble pie, being apologetic about comments made by a comedian about Puerto Rico, but that didn't happen. Instead, he came out all guns blazing, focused entirely on obliterating Kamala Harris.
Yes, he did. And he did a quick and very wise pivot. I think at some point, though, it would behoove him to actually put out a personal apology, especially to the Puerto Rican voting base. But besides that, you know, this was definitely a lower energy press conference, but I will take a more docile President Trump over an erratic one any day, because this is when he actually stays on message and stays on point. And I thought it was actually done very well. And he was able to bring in some truthful stories, some very hard stories to listen to that tugged on your heartstrings, and rightfully so. So, you know, I wish that we would see more of this from Donald Trump.
It definitely felt more somber and more restrained. His voice was an octave lower. He was speaking slow. He seemed to be speaking from notes. Many things he doesn't normally do. He normally riffs and just goes off on what he calls the weave. 3 hours of it we had on the Joe Rogan podcast, but his rhetoric was very hard-hitting, accusing Kamala Harris of bloodshed, squalor to our cities. War has been unleashed, causing so much death and destruction abroad, and we have to save America. We have to end the chaos caused by crooked Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and they stole the presidency. Trump absolutely going for the throat.
Oh, 100%. And I think the fact that the voters were actually, you know, we can't wait for this election to be over. The chaos is still only becoming more inflamed. We now have ballot boxes that have been set on fire in Oregon and Washington. We have the Nevada National Guard that's being deployed on Election Day, just in case. We also have in Arizona snipers, bulletproof vests that are being used. This is at a whole new level, and I think that this can't be over soon enough.
Yeah, and he also talked about how it was safer in Venezuela. He said Caracas is now a safe city because all of the bad guys have gone to America. He talks about how he used to get shot on the streets of those cities, and now that's happening in America. He talks about murderers, drug dealers, gang members. He spoke out about endless obsession with transgender operations, of defunding the police and of stopping fracking. Very, very much on the offensive. If anybody expected Donald Trump to be bowing down on his knees and apologetic, it just didn't happen.
No, and I don't think that many actually expected that someone with an ego of his size was going to come out with his tail between his legs. I still think it would be wise, however, to at least put out some kind of an apology coming directly from him and not just the campaign, so that way we can continue to move forward and to heal in so many other areas that have been damaged over inane comments, unfortunately, that they not only hurt the Republican nominee at the top, but it does trickle down the ballot. So I think it would be wise to still say something in the form of, and I'm sorry.
I think you're right. If we remember that the last time Pennsylvania was won by tens of thousands of votes, there are 600,000 Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania. So maybe you're right, that apology perhaps will come in time. Thank you very much for joining us, Amy. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very, very much. There's lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, including we'll be getting reaction to the airline EasyJet's drive to hire more armed forces veterans for their workforce, with the company saying it still values the skills gained in the armed forces. A magnificent initiative ahead of Armistice Day. But first, here's your latest news headlines with Sophia Wesler.
Martin, thank you. It's 4:31. These are your headlines from the GB newsroom. The suspect in July's Southport stabbings, Axel Rudicabarna, is facing 2 new charges today in connection with the attack on Hart Street in Southport on the 29th of July, which resulted in the deaths of 3 young girls. In addition to existing charges of murder and attempted murder, the 18-year-old is now charged with producing the biological toxin ricin and possessing an Al-Qaeda training manual for potential terrorism preparation. He will appear via video link at Westminster Magistrates Court tomorrow. Conservative leadership candidate Robert Jenrick said he was concerned facts may have been withheld from the public. Meanwhile, Downing Street has denied the government had been involved in decision-making about the timing of an announcement about the charges against the Southport attack suspect. In other news, the Chancellor says the NHS is the lifeblood of Britain, promising to reverse a decade of neglect and underinvestment. But she warns that a single budget can't undo 14 years of damage. It comes as Rachel Reeves is set to unveil a budget injecting billions into the NHS, funding 2 million more for appointments, with £1.5 billion aimed at new surgical hubs and scanners and £70 million for radiotherapy. However, speaking to us this morning, Health Secretary Wes Streeting admitted that significant improvements will take time.
What tomorrow's budget will give us the chance to do is arrest that decline and mark a turning point in the history of the NHS and in the decline we've seen over the last 14 years. Today what we're talking about is the delivery of our manifesto commitments to cut waiting lists. So the 40,000 more appointments every week we said as our first step, and we are already ramping up to those 40,000 more appointments.
Meanwhile, ahead of the budget tomorrow, Sir Keir Starmer has been told it is not too late to change his mind on winter fuel payment cuts, with Conservative MPs handing in a petition signed by 250,000 people. At this time of year, more than 11 million pensioners would normally be receiving a letter from the Department for Work and Pensions confirming when their winter fuel allowance would be paid. Instead, the letters arriving this year are informing approximately 10 million pensioners they will not be getting their usual payment. To the US now, where Donald Trump has taken aim at his rival Kamala Harris, accusing her of heartless and cold-blooded betrayal over borders. The Republican presidential candidate has been speaking at his Mar-a-Lago, Florida residence with 1 week to go till the US election. Despite keeping crowds waiting, he was greeted by chants of USA, USA. Trump also took a swipe at rival Harris, claiming she launched a coup to steal presidency from Joe Biden. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.3006 and €1.2039 euros. The price of gold is £2,129 and 6 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,218 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Now on Donald Trump, on those Southport terror charges, on tomorrow's budget. If you want to get in touch, simply go to gbnews.com/your say, and I'll read out the best of your messages a little later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Quite a cloudy afternoon on offer, largely dry, and there are also some brighter spells, particularly in southern and eastern areas. And where you catch that brighter weather, it is feeling mild for the time of year. We've currently got a cold front clearing the southeast of the country, and that's allowing a ridge of high pressure to build elsewhere. So as we head into the evening, there's going to be plenty of dry and fine weather around, a mix of cloud and some clearer spells. That cloud will be thick enough to produce some spots of rain and drizzle at times, and also where we see those clearer skies, we'll see some mist and fog developing, which may be rather stubborn to clear by the time we reach the morning. Feeling a little chillier under those prolonged clear spells, but for many, it's a rather mild night on offer. As we head through into Wednesday morning then, a fairly cloudy start across much of Scotland, perhaps some clearer spells across the Northern Isles, but can't rule out the risk of a shower. Similar across Northern Ireland, Northern England, a fairly cloudy start to tomorrow. That cloud once again thick enough to produce some drizzle, this mainly around hilly areas. And similar across the rest of England and Wales, a mix of cloud and some clearer spells and some pockets of mist and fog around to start the day too. But otherwise, that high pressure generally building, leaving plenty of fine, settled weather. Similar day to today, where we'll see a mix of cloud and some brighter spells at times. But on the whole, it is going to be largely dry. Perhaps some rain and showers just moving into the far Northern Isles as we head into the afternoon. Slight dip in those temperatures, but still widely above average for the time of year. So still pleasant for this time in October. Through into the evening, we'll see another fairly similar evening, really. Once again, a mix of that cloud and those clear spells, and likely to see some mist and fog develop once again, and still with those outbreaks of rain moving into Orkney and Shetland. And to end the week and to start the weekend, remaining fairly similar. Cloud with some bright spells, and just a slight dip in the temperatures as we head into the weekend.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M6 northbound in Lancashire. It's partially blocked for an accident between junction 31 Sammersbury and 31A for Longridge. We're also seeing a slowdown on the opposite carriageway due to onlookers. Stop-start for the M6 southbound in Cheshire. There's a lane closed for a broken down vehicle between junction 17 Sandbach and 16 Stoke-on-Trent. Queues in the West Midlands. Firstly, slow for the M42 southbound due to an earlier accident on the entry slip road at junction 5, the Solihull bypass. It's also slow for the M6 northbound in the West Midlands. There's a lane closed for a broken down vehicle between junction 6 Spaghetti Junction and 7 for Great Bar. And we're seeing queuing traffic on the M25 clockwise in Hertfordshire. The exit slip road is partially blocked for a broken down lorry at junction 23 South Mims. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Budget Day on GB News tomorrow. Stay with us all day for the most anxiously anticipated budget in a generation.
Morning through to evening, we'll be here with insight and analysis, crunching the numbers
as we work out the cost to the country and, most importantly, to you.
Because the Chancellor has a bill to pay. The question is,
who's going to pay it? Budget Day tomorrow on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:39 and I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, how would you like to win your entire Christmas this year? I blooming well would. Well, we're giving you the chance to do just that with the very latest Great British Giveaway, and it's a festive bumper edition. Here's the details that you'll need to get your hands on it.
We're giving you the chance.
Philly Boost. Now, here's a wonderful story as we approach this year's Armistice Day, because EasyJet, the airline, has launched a new campaign to recruit more veterans to its workforce, with the company saying it valued the skills gained in the forces. And the airline has joined forces with best-selling author Andy McNabb, the SAS man, to support the launch of We Served, a new online platform designed to help veterans apply for jobs, including aircraft engineering and cabin crew roles. It's a superb idea, and I'm now joined by Philip Ingram, a friend of the show, for comment on this. Philip, I think it's a wonderful initiative, and we all know so often the boys and the girls come out of the armed forces, they go back to Civvy Street, they're directionless, they want purpose, tremendous amount of skills, tremendous amount of moral courage and experience, and this, to me, is an excellent initiative, and I assume you're also a fan.
Oh, brilliant initiative. And, fantastic for EasyJet, because they're going to get people who are motivated, who are used to working in difficult circumstances, who can adapt very quickly indeed, who don't sit and clock watch. They've got a work ethic, and it will add real value to them.
And there are many companies that do this. I believe Jaguar Land Rover, they have 1,500 veterans part of their workforce. They acknowledge the skills they can bring. There's also the Armed Forces Covenant. I believe almost 12,500 organisations signed up to that. Tell us, Philip, what kind of skills, services and morality do people from the Armed Forces offer, and why are they so valuable?
Well, you've got people who are used to turning up on time, who are used to doing unusual things, who are used to, as I said earlier, not clock watching, who've got a large number of other skills that they've built up over a period of time, including leadership skills, but also dealing with people. Being in the military is not about going out with big heavy weapons and killing people in different parts of the world. It's about interacting with people and trying to add value to people's lives in different countries around the world. That's exactly the sort of thing that you need in the customer services side of things in EasyJet and other companies. But also the armed forces give people an awful lot of professional skills as well. So as you highlighted, mechanics, but we've got engineers, we've got communications experts, we've got IT experts, we've got intelligence and information experts, and so many across the board. And those skills you can easily be harnessed to add value into any company. And there are a large number of companies out there that employ veterans, but I don't think they shout enough about it.
Do you know, I think it's absolutely bang on. It's one of those things you hear about, puts a spring in your step at last. People acknowledging, people prepared to pay the ultimate price in the theatre of conflict and war. Surely they're worth a punt. And getting away from paper qualifications, obsession with having degrees. I'd like to see more armed forces, people fast-tracked into the police force. Maybe if we did that, we'd have much more of a chance on the streets of Britain. Philip Ingram, always a delight to have you on the show. A real feel-good story, and don't we all need one of those at the moment? Thank you for joining us on the show. Always an absolute pleasure. Now, coming up, the Chancellor has admitted that her inbound tax raid may not even be enough to fix their health service. Now, haven't we known that all along? Can it ever truly be fixed? Let's face it, the NHS has been 7 days from death since I was born. That's coming next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, Georgia. Your story is incredible. Just remind us of it. You quit running in, was it 2017? Because I mean, to be quite frank, your body was knackered, you had injuries, you thought you couldn't go on anymore. But then you started running again at Park Run in 2022. And of course, this summer at the Olympics, you won bronze.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, it has been a bit of a journey. And yeah, there was a period of time where I stopped running completely. And then Park Run was just something I got into with my friends, my family, just local community. And I started to see the improvements that led me to get back in contact with my old coach and just worked my way back up to elite level running and got a bronze medal this summer in Paris.
Did you ever think that would happen when you were beginning to take part in park runs again? Did you ever think you'd be winning bronze in the 1500 metres at the Olympics?
No, not at all. It would have been absolutely bonkers, I think, to think that at the time. It was just building my way up, but it was all about finding happiness in running again. And that's really what Park Run does, I think, really well.
And can you just tell us in the audience what had happened to you in 2017?
So I had been like a good junior athlete. I had gone over to the US on a track scholarship at university, and I just experienced so many different injuries. So various stress fractures in my shins, and I just graduated and just thought there's no way I can run anymore. So took a big break. And then, yeah, over the past few years, I just got back into running slowly, built it up, and Park Run is just something that is on every Saturday. So many parks across the UK, very accessible, free. So it was just a really good way to get back into a fun but semi-level of competitive running.
The People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday, we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's almost 4:49. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, as the autumn budget is finally revealed tomorrow, Chancellor Rachel Reeves has hinted that more money, yet more money, will be provided to the NHS. However, it's not all good news, as Reeves has said that the extra billions is unlikely going to be the shot in the arm that the NHS so desperately needs, with Labour pointing the blame of 14 years of Conservative governments badly managing our health service. Of course, they're going to blame the Tories. Now, is there any figure of money which can stop the decline in the NHS and secure its future, or is it just doomed to failure? Well, joining us down the line to discuss the NHS and those extra billions coming their way is the former NHS Trust Chairman, Roy Lilly. Roy, always a pleasure to have your input. Look, we've been told for endless years the answer isn't to keep turning on the taps. The answer is to fix the leaking bucket. That memo seems to have got lost in the airwaves. The answer, once again, seems to be yet more endless billions, and yet we will still, no doubt here, that the NHS will once again be in crisis.
Well, it's true. I think, to be fair, there's a certain amount of backside covering going on with Wes Streeting, who sort of arrived in his office, you know, with a great hurrah, I'm here and I'm going to save the broken NHS. And I think now he's got there, he's found it's a bit more difficult than he thought. Yeah. There are multiple factors, but I mean, the headline, if you look at what's just happened, they've just put 1.57 billion. 1.57 is an odd figure, isn't it? How do you get to 1.57? Anyway, the 1.57 billion is going in from April, that's next April, to fund some surgical hubs, which are a good idea because that means that the operating theatres don't get all bunged up with accidents and emergency and whatever. They can do like a clean look at waiting lists. So we want more of those. And also diagnostics, MRI scanners, CT scanners, and so on. I mean, per head of population, we're right at the bottom of the European list on numbers per head of population of scanners. So certainly an investment in those two things are important. Now, that you can't buy the scanners off the shelf, and a lot of them have got to be built into specialist premises. So there's a fair amount of preparatory work that the NHS can get on with. But certainly, I mean, Streeting's got one job. And if you look at what happened before the election, there were three things the public wanted doing: sorting the economy, fixing the small boats, and sorting out waiting lists. And waiting lists was often the top of the list. Well, how's he going to do that? Well, I don't think in terms of overall numbers, the waiting lists are likely to come down, because don't forget, for every patient that comes off the waiting list, there's more that join. But I think that what he's aiming to do, which seems sensible to me, is to cut the waiting time. It's not the length of the queue, it's how long you're in the queue. You know, if you come back into Heathrow and you see this great queue in front of you with your passport and the rest of it, providing you're moving all the time, you don't have a row with anybody. So I think that's what they're going to try and do. They're trying to get back to the 18-week target, which is the NHS's actually legal obligation target in the NHS constitution. They say they can get back to that by the end of the Parliament. Well, you know, good luck with that. Perhaps they will. But certainly it's going to take an investment. There's no question. The NHS doesn't have the capacity or the kit to crack on in the way it needs to do. There's light at the end of the tunnel. Waiting lists are comprised 60%, I think, of people on waiting lists need a diagnostic of one sort or other. Get the diagnostics sorted out, and you'll find that about 20% of people with a diagnostic need inpatient care. That's where the big queues are. Outpatients could be done quite quickly. So if you wrap all that up together, I think, they've got half a chance, but it's going to cost them more money because the more work you do, the more it costs. It's not just wages. If you do more hip operations, you've got to buy more hips, and it's the supply chain. So it's a whole complicated set of circumstances.
Roy, we've got a quick 45 seconds here. Does the NHS need a bit more drastic surgery? Does it need to go partially private? And do you think the Labour Party have got the guts to do that?
I think they would have the guts to do it. Blair had a good go at it as well. But look, you take your taxes out of your left-hand pocket, you take insurances out of your right-hand pocket, you're still going to pay. That's not the issue. If the NHS is going to improve its performance, it needs a big investment in IT. That's where the real delays are. So if they can do that, then I think, at the end of the 5 years, we may see a very different NHS.
Superb stuff. Always a pleasure to get your huge font of knowledge. Roy Lilly, former NHS Trust Chairman, thank you very much for joining us on the show. Thank you very, very much. Now, don't go anywhere, because in the next hour, the man who inspired Trustonomics will join us ahead of the Chancellor's budget tomorrow. A lot of people are expecting this to be bitter medicine, perhaps even a nightmare on Downing Street on Halloween Eve. The man behind Trustonomics will give us his opinion. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. But first, here's your weather, and it's Honor Krizik.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Quite a cloudy afternoon on offer, largely dry, and there are also some brighter spells, particularly in southern and eastern areas. And where you catch that brighter weather, it is feeling mild for the time of year. We've currently got a cold front clearing the southeast of the country, and that's allowing a ridge of high pressure to build elsewhere. So as we head into the evening, there's going to be plenty of dry and fine weather around, a mix of cloud and some clearer spells. That cloud will be thick enough to produce some spots of rain and drizzle at times, and also where we see those clearer skies, we'll see some mist and fog developing, which may be rather stubborn to clear by the time we reach the morning. Feeling a little chillier under those prolonged clear spells, but for many, it's a rather mild night on offer. As we head through into Wednesday morning then, a fairly cloudy start across much of Scotland, perhaps some clearer spells across the Northern Isles, but can't rule out the risk of a shower. Similar across Northern Ireland, Northern England, a fairly cloudy start to tomorrow. That cloud once again thick enough to produce some drizzle, this mainly around hilly areas. And similar across the rest of England and Wales, a mix of cloud and some clearer spells and some pockets of mist and fog around to start the day too. But otherwise, that high pressure generally building, leaving plenty of fine, settled weather. Similar day to today, where we'll see a mix of cloud and some brighter spells at times. But on the whole, it is going to be largely dry. Perhaps some rain and showers just moving into the far Northern Isles as we head into the afternoon. Slight dip in those temperatures, but still widely above average for the time of year. So still pleasant for this time in October. Through into the evening, we'll see another fairly similar evening, really. Once again, a mix of that cloud and those clear spells, and likely to see some mist and fog develop once again, and still with those outbreaks of rain moving into Orkney and Shetland. And to end the week and to start the weekend, remaining fairly similar. Cloud with some bright spells, and just a slight dip in the temperatures as we head into the weekend.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M6 northbound in Lancashire. It's partially blocked for an accident between junction 31 Samlesbury and 31A Longridge. We're also seeing slow traffic on the opposite carriageway due to onlookers. Slow for the M6 southbound in Cheshire. There's a lane closed for a broken down vehicle between junction 17 Sandbach heading towards junction 16 Stoke-on-Trent. We're also seeing slow traffic on the M42 southbound in the West Midlands due to an earlier accident on the entry slip road at junction 5, the Solihull bypass. We're seeing slow traffic on the M49 northbound in Gloucestershire to join the M4 at the Prince of Wales Bridge. There's a lane closed there for debris on the road. And queues on the M25 clockwise in Hertfordshire. The exit slip road is partially blocked for recovery work at junction 23 South Mims. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
We're giving luck.
Budget Day on GB News tomorrow. Stay with us all day for the most anxiously anticipated budget in a generation.
Morning through to evening, we'll be here with insight and analysis, crunching the numbers
as we work out the cost to the country and, most importantly, to you.
Because the Chancellor has a bill to pay. The question is...
who's going to pay it? Budget Day, tomorrow on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, the 18-year-old accused of murdering 3 young schoolgirls in Southport and attempting to murder 10 others faces 2 new charges, and both of them are terror-related. And Donald Trump speaks out against Kamala Harris as Election Day gets down to the wire, where he accused Kamala of a heartless and cold-blooded betrayal over USA borders. With just 7 days to go, who is going to be the next president of the United States of America? And a shocking new poll reveals that Sir Keir Starmer is the least popular Prime Minister in modern history, with his approval ratings absolutely tanking, down 49 points since the general election. Can Sir Keir Starmer turn it around, or will it be a nightmare on Downing Street? And that's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. It's been an incredible afternoon of breaking news. The Southport triple murderer now facing 2 new charges, both of them terror-related. The first one, the production of the nerve agent ricin. The second charge, the possession of an Al-Qaeda terror handbook. We'll have the full story on that. And also, Donald Trump held a press conference today at Mar-a-Lago. We covered it here live on the show. People expected him to come out and apologise for comments made by a comedian about Puerto Rico. Nothing could be further from the truth. Donald Trump was on an absolute war footing, laying into Kamala Harris, accusing her of betraying America, betraying its borders, and turning the country into a crime-filled hellhole. An astonishing press conference. We'll have all of the latest on that. Get in touch all the usual ways, gbnews.com/your say. But now it's your headlines, and here's Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. It's just gone 5 o'clock. These are your headlines from the GB newsroom. The suspect, accused of murdering 3 young girls in July's Southport stabbing attacks, is now facing 2 new charges. Axel Rudakabana is now charged with producing the biological toxin ricin and possessing an Al-Qaeda training manual for potential terrorism preparation. The charges are separate to those over the killings of the girls. The police are not treating the stabbings as an act of terrorism. Rudakabana will appear via video link at Westminster Magistrates Court tomorrow. In other news, the Chancellor says the NHS is the lifeblood of Britain, promising to reverse a decade of neglect and underinvestment, but she warns that a single budget can't undo 14 years of damage. It comes as Rachel Reeves is set to unveil a budget injecting billions into the NHS, funding 2 million more appointments, with £1.5 billion aimed at new surgical hubs and scanners, and £70 million for radiotherapy. However, speaking to us this morning, Health Secretary Wes Streeting admitted that significant improvements will take time.
What tomorrow's budget will give us the chance to do is arrest that decline and mark a turning point in the history of the NHS and in the decline we've seen over the last 14 years. Today what we're talking about is the delivery of our manifesto commitments to cut waiting lists. So the 40,000 more appointments every week we said as our first step, and we are already ramping up to those 40,000 more appointments.
Meanwhile, ahead of the budget tomorrow, Sir Keir Starmer's been told it is not too late to change his mind on winter fuel payment cuts, with Conservative MPs handing in a petition signed by 250,000 people. At this time of year, more than 11 million pensioners would normally be receiving a letter from the Department for Work and Pensions confirming when their winter fuel allowance would be paid. Instead, the letters arriving this year are informing approximately 10 million pensioners they will not be getting their usual payment. Shadow Health Secretary Victoria Atkins says opposition parties will press the government for as long as it takes to protect pensioners.
Conservative members of Parliament and former members of Parliament are all desperately worried about Labour's cruel decision to scrap winter fuel payments for millions of vulnerable pensioners. And so we are issuing a petition that has had hundreds of thousands of signatures that we're going to present to the Prime Minister in the hope that he will listen to us and to our constituents and to the millions of people who are very, very worried by this cruel decision to make up for Labour's cockeyed accounting.
Former Scottish First Minister Alex Salmond has been remembered, the political leader who took Scotland so close to his dream of independence and as a dear friend at his funeral held this afternoon. It follows his sudden death from a heart attack at the age of 69. Family, friends and colleagues gathered in Strishan Parish Church to pay their respects to the Scottish leader. The service was conducted by Reverend Ian McEwen, a long-time family friend who's described today as an incredibly difficult day for loved ones. He added that the family is in deep sorrow and is taking this time to privately grieve and honour the man they adored. To the US now, where Donald Trump has taken aim at his rival Kamala Harris, accusing her of heartless and cold-blooded betrayal over borders. The Republican presidential candidate has been speaking at his Mar-a-Lago, Florida residence with 1 week to go till the US election. Despite keeping crowds waiting, he was greeted by chants of USA, USA. Trump also took another swipe at his rival, claiming she launched a coup to steal presidency from Joe Biden.
Be saving it from the incredible destruction that's been caused by crooked Joe Biden and Kamala. And she's responsible because he wasn't responsible, and she never said that. He didn't know too much about what was happening. Maybe that was exposed during the debate. And yet still the way they took that away from him was not right. It wasn't right. It shouldn't have happened that way. They walked in, they said, we're taking it away. They stole the presidency of the United States. You can call it a coup, you can call it whatever, but they stole it. They went in like taking candy from a baby.
Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. And incredible breaking news this afternoon. And the 18-year-old accused of murdering 3 young schoolgirls in Southport and attempting to murder 10 others has also now been charged with attempting to make a biological weapon using the deadly toxin ricin. Axel Rudakabana is also facing a second charge under the Terrorism Act, possessing an Al-Qaeda terror manual. It's an astonishing development in a case which appalled the nation back in July. And we're joined now by GB News' Home and Security Editor Mark White, who can give us an update on the Southport stabbing incident live from Liverpool. Mark, over to you.
Well, it is exactly 3 months since that horrific attack in which 3 young girls were killed, 8 other primary school-aged girls were injured and 2 adults were also injured. And now, of course, 3 months on, the news of this very significant development with a further 2 charges added to the indictment against Axel Rudakabana. Now, those charges, as you mentioned, relating to an attempt to produce the toxin ricin and also possessing a downloaded copy of an Al-Qaeda terrorist manual. This is how the Merseyside Chief Constable, Serena Kennedy, outlined those charges just a little earlier.
2 further offences relate to evidence obtained by Merseyside Police during searches of Axel Rudakabana's home address. as part of a lengthy and complex investigation which has been ongoing since the 29th of July. The additional charges are the production of a biological toxin, namely ricin, contrary to Section 1 of the Biological Weapons Act 1974, and possession of information, namely a PDF file entitled Military Studies in the Jihad Against the Tyrants, the Al-Qaeda Training Manual, likely to be useful to a person committing or preparing to commit an act of terrorism.
Now, although that second charge is an offence under Section 58 of the Terrorism Act 2000, the police are not yet prepared to declare the Southport attack as a terrorist incident, and that's simply because they say they've not been able to establish a motivation as yet behind that attack. So for now, it remains an ongoing investigation, but not yet declared a terrorist attack. Now, as the news of these additional charges sinks in, as far as the public here in Merseyside and further afield are concerned, well, the Chief Constable urged people to remain calm and not to speculate. This is what she said a little earlier.
I would strongly advise anyone against speculating as to the motivation in this case. The criminal proceedings against Axel Rudikabana are live, and he has a right to a fair trial. It is extremely important that there is no reporting, commentary or sharing of information online that could prejudice these proceedings. I want to remind everyone that the trial is scheduled for January next year.
Well, despite the calls for calm, there are concerns about the potential for an adverse reaction to this news today, and there are, we're told, additional police resources being made available to Merseyside Police. As for Axel Rudikabana, he will appear before a video link at Westminster Magistrates Court tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very much then, Mark White, for that update live from Liverpool. And I'm joined now in our studio by our political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, I know that the Downing Street have released a statement on the Southport charges today. A lot of questions will be asked, including primarily what did the Prime Minister know and when?
Yeah, so we've been briefed by the PM's deputy official spokesman. She says it's important we let the police and CPS do their jobs for a trial to establish the facts. Our focus is on ensuring that we get justice for the victims and their loved ones. We must let the police do their jobs and let the trial establish the facts. The government is focused on ensuring the families and all those affected see justice. First and foremost, in Sir Keir Starmer's minds and thoughts are those with the families and their communities. His thoughts remain firmly with them. We also asked the PM's deputy official spokesman if the PM had been kept informed during the investigation, because, of course, all of us have heard this the first time today about this other part of this, of the investigation into the attacker. They say this more broadly. So broadly, the government and police maintain a dialogue. That's important for matters of public safety and has always been the case and would be expected, but I wouldn't otherwise comment on the details of communication between police and government. And we are briefed that the timing of the announcement today is a matter for the CPS. They decide the charging decisions are made independent and made by the CPS, not by anybody else. So they're trying to keep it all calm. There'll be question marks about who knew what when after the trial, but not for now.
OK, let's move on to the hugely anticipated budget, of course. We've been talking about it for absolutely forever, and isn't that the point? It seems we know most of the devil in the detail. Most of the detail doesn't look good. Looks like it's going to be a grim day for practically everybody.
I can't believe we're finally there, Martin. I feel like I've been talking about this forever with you, of course, and we all have. And our viewers and listeners are probably a bit cheesed off with the delay. The recent battle, the conversation in Westminster has been what is a working person. We know they're meant to be treated most kindly in the budget tomorrow by Rachel Reeves. We'll know soon enough, in 24 hours, we'll have seen it all played out live on GB News. The speculation tonight about an increase in the minimum wage. A newspaper this morning reported a 6% rise for 1 million of the lowest paid workers. from £11.44 an hour to £12.20. Younger employees, at the time said, will also get a big boost. Maybe those aged 18 to 20 years old will go up from £8.60 to towards where older adults get it. There's a meeting of the political cabinet today. Now, that's a meeting of the same cabinet, really the same people. Yep. But they talk about the politics of this budget. It's so important to try and reset this government. As I've been saying to you earlier, essentially, up till now, it's been the trailers. The movie starts tomorrow. What's the narrative of this government? That's what we're waiting for. And in this briefing, the PM said this, I thought was fascinating to his colleagues today. They will be protecting the pay slips of working people. Now, what that means is your payslip as an employee won't show any increase in payments of, let's say, national insurance, but the employers might be paying more in their share, and that's why payslips is a new language of what's looked after in this budget.
And the rise on NI on employers, plus the inflation, triple inflation pay rise you talked about, is going to cost employers £6 billion. So bad news for them.
Well, the question is, where does it go to? Will they shoulder it themselves? Big companies.
Of course they won't.
Well, they may do, may not do. Big companies can maybe afford not to pass on a 1 or 2% increase in employers' national insurance, taking it up from 13.8% to as high as 15.8%. But smaller companies may find it very hard to shoulder that. And will there be any protection in the budget for smaller companies from this big increase? This is basically a big increase in their jobs tax.
Talking about movies, it sounds like a nightmare on Downing Street. Another movie that's not got a happy ending is Sir Keir Starmer's popularity. A poll out today by More in Common, the most unpopular Prime Minister in history. Takes some doing.
It's falling faster than an apple off an autumn apple tree, Martin. 11 points at the time of the election on the 4th of July. That was a positive approval rating. Now minus 38%, which is a complete disaster for him personally. I mean, he really needs to get a grip on these approval ratings. We are a long way away from the next election. We are as much as 4.5 years away. So this can improve and it will get better. There were some bad times, dog days for Tony Blair over Bernie Ecclestone and the donation there from him back in the day. That caused him real problems literally months after the general election. And look what he went on to win in 2001, 2005, and of course was forced out or left the government in 2007.
OK, Chris, well, stick with us. Excellent stuff, because you'd like to speak to our next guest, I know. Joining us now is the economist Patrick Minford, the gentleman who inspired Trisonomics, of course, and who was an advisor to Margaret Thatcher. Seems a long time ago now, those days, Patrick Minford of Margaret Thatcher. At any rate, looking ahead to tomorrow's budget, presumably it's the absolute antithesis of what you'd like to see. You'd like to see low tax, less regulation, free markets. Tomorrow sounds like the absolute opposite. What do you expect?
Well, I expect, as you've said, the absolute opposite of what I'd like to see. It's just taxes have been going up and up and up, and of course they're damaging growth. And the prospects of growth are awful. It is really a continuation of, unfortunately, of policies of raising taxes of the previous government. So it's been a disaster for quite a long time now.
OK, I'm also joined in our studio by our political editor, Chris Hope. Patrick, you'd like to fire a question at you.
Patrick, it's great to see you here. Just to quickly ask you a question about the delay in the budget. The 16-week delay has been caused by a 10-week requirement for the Office of Budget Responsibility to vet the books. Is that caused needless uncertainty? And just on the issue of the OBR, we'll be hearing tomorrow from a new thing called the Office for Value for Money. Do you think our elected politicians are hiding behind quangos to avoid actually making choices?
Well, I do. I think this OBR idea, which was actually set up by George Osborne, has been a very bad idea, because the central democratic decisions on tax and spending are political ones, and it's up to the government to stand up and defend them and do the arithmetic themselves. And they've just passed it on to the OBR, which is, in my view, a dereliction of duty.
And what you did with Liz Truss and advising her, the same idea from Labour. They want also to get growth going. They're just going about it in a different way. Do you think that Rachel Reeves and Sir Keir Starmer can succeed where Liz Truss failed?
No, I don't think so, because she hasn't really understood the basic point that growth comes from the private sector. And you've talked about these weeks and weeks of anticipation. Of course, they started out saying that the private sector and the so-called rich would pay for everything, didn't they? And luckily, that got squashed by the Treasury, because they pointed out pretty early on that there was no way they were going to raise any revenue by that route. So that at least has been improved by all these weeks of speculation. But in terms of the strategy, it's completely crazy, because you need to encourage the private sector to do investment and raise productivity, and you simply don't do that by raising taxes. So they've got the cart completely before the horse. They want to raise money to pay for public services, but the best way to do that is to have growth, and the best way to have growth is to keep taxes low. So they should start by keeping taxes low, and then their finances would improve naturally by the growth in the economy. But by going the other way around, they're destroying the growth prospects, and so they're actually going to worsen the long-term financial prospects for the government by doing that.
Patrick, a lot of taxes are very complicated. A lot of people don't understand them, but they do understand things that have a huge emotional value. This time around, it's the winter fuel allowance. £1.4 billion is not a great saving. Back in the day of Maggie Thatcher, of course, the poll tax was the tax which ended up effectively bringing the end of Thatcherism. It was hated by the public. There was a U-turn. Do you think that the winter fuel allowance could become Rachel Reeves' version of that? And if you were advising her today, Patrick, would you say this is disastrous, it's time to change your mind, get rid of this, it's a cruel and punitive tax?
Well, I think it's been politically a very stupid thing to do, because, as you say, it's raised virtually no money getting rid of it, and it's caused an absolute furore. Because, of course, the means testing of winter fuel tax is very, very hazy indeed. And so it's not at all well targeted. And a lot of people who haven't claimed what they could have done, by benefits from one thing or another, are being hit, who are actually quite poor. So it's been a complete disaster. And so the whole strategy is really misconceived from start to finish. Of course, there's been all this stuff about working people, and so on. Of course, they're going to wind up by putting national insurance contributions on employers. But that's just as much a tax on working people, because it has to be passed on. I mean, businesses are going to pass it on. They always do. And it's exactly the same tax in its effects as national insurance contributions by workers. But it has to be said, it's better to put taxes of a general sort like that than to put taxes on, businesses and the high rollers in the economy. I mean, that's really stupid when we really need those people to get the economy going and growing.
Yeah, maybe we'll go back to the old days of the 1970s, where the richest people simply clear off and never come back. Patrick Minford, thank you very much for joining us on the show. Absolute pleasure to have your company. Now, next, Donald Trump speaks out against Kamala Harris as Election Day gets down to the wire, accusing her of a heartless and cold-blooded betrayal over America's borders. Just 7 days to go now until the greatest political show on earth. More on this next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, our next guests have been working closely with celebrities and MPs to help clean up our planet.
Very important. Think Ocean was founded in 2021 with two main goals. One, educating the next generation to make sure that they know when they're growing up that naturally we have to take care of the planet and cleaning pollution that's already in the environment.
Well, joining us now to tell us more is Think Ocean's founder, Hugo Valdez-Vera, and the co-founder, Nolene Mariappan. Really good
morning,
to see you both this morning. So, Nolene, let's start with you. What is Think Ocean and why did you want to start this back in 2021?
Yes, so Hugo had actually been working on the environment and climate action for quite a long time. When he moved to the UK, he realised that there was a growing problem with plastic pollution and that more needed to be done because people weren't actually seeing the link between plastic, the impact on the environment and climate change. So he founded the organisation and I joined him with three goals, really. Education, looking at technology to scale solutions, and looking at how we develop more circular economy programs. So actually looking at reusing, recycling, actually creating local economies from what people would consider waste.
Hugo, just how bad is plastic pollution around the world, and especially here in the UK?
Well, it is bad, but we don't know the extent of how bad it is. You know, this is not much interest from the bigger players or, some government for us to know every detail of the pollution. So if we know that is from 1 to 10 is 2, probably it's about 6.
Oh.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:26. Now, earlier we heard from Donald Trump as the US election heats up in just 7 days' time. All that race is on. Let's have a quick listen to what he had to say earlier.
The election itself is going very well. We're leading, I believe, in all 7 swing states. In less than 4 years, Kamala Harris has obliterated our borders, obliterated. We've never had a situation like this. Decimated the middle class, and runaway inflation has caused problems, the likes of which we never thought possible. Bloodshed, squalor to our cities is common, and they've unleashed a war and chaos all over the world. You take a look, everything's blowing up or getting ready to blow up. No respect for our country anymore, no respect for our leadership. No person has caused so much destruction and death at home and abroad should ever be allowed to be the President of the United States. You can't have that.
Well, anybody expecting an apology about Puerto Rico was sorely disappointed. Joining me now is the US political commentator, Laurie Laird. Laurie, welcome to the show. Sorry seems to be the hardest word for Donald Trump to say. People thought that might be the tone of today's speech. Instead, absolutely both barrels firing straight into Kamala Harris. Donald Trump, 7 days ago, completely on the warpath.
Look, who on earth thought Donald Trump was going to apologize? Did you? Come on. You've never heard that word come out of his mouth. Heard a lot of speculation that maybe he may cover it. Not a chance. Never saw that coming. But listening to Donald Trump and the comments that you just played were in the opening bit of his presentation. My God, Kamala Harris was a lot more effective than I thought as vice president. She trashed the economy. Donald Trump seems to think that she is responsible for some of the wars that were going on. Let me go back to my notes. Devastated the middle class. Did you realize that she got so much done in these 4 years?
Nevertheless, though, in Pennsylvania in particular, The last election, Joe Biden won that state by 80,555 votes, Laurie Laird. There are 600,000 Puerto Ricans in the state of Pennsylvania. Do you think it's been overblown about the comments by the comedian at Madison Square Garden? Or do you think in time Donald Trump will square up to the Puerto Rican community, say, look, didn't really mean it, sorry, please, I want you to vote for me?
Look, this has been a Democratic talking point for the past couple of days. Really devilishly hard to measure whether that big cohort of Puerto Rican voters will make a difference. We don't know how many intended to vote, while the Latino community and the Puerto Rican community has tended to vote Democratic. Trump has made some real inroads with that community, and whether those rather inopportune comments that were made by a comedian, they weren't made by Donald Trump, they were made by a comedian who was almost his warm-up act on Sunday, whether this will influence things is a question. The other thing I need to point out, and this influences not just the Puerto Rican vote, but influences all of the opinion polling that we will see for the next week. And that's the question of early voting. How many people have already voted? How many in the Puerto Rican community have already voted? Historically, we've seen more Democrats vote early than we have seen Republicans. And that sort of makes me question a lot of the opinion polls that we're going to see here on out, because a lot of people have already cast their vote.
You know, back in 2016, they were calling Donald Trump a fascist, a white supremacist, comparing him to Hitler. How things haven't changed. It's the same old broken record. And yet, Laurie, look at the betting markets, look at the money. They're putting the smart money on Trump. Trump has never had shorter odds to win. Certainly the betting market favours Donald Trump, and the stock market, crypto's going wild. Trump's own currency, Trump media, is going wild. If you follow the money, and normally the money is far more accurate than the polls, Donald seems to be edging it.
Well, I mean, there are a lot to say there, but let's separate out a couple of things. The betting market is favoring Donald Trump. Interesting point there. The Financial Times, and I personally think the Financial Times is a pretty credible source when it comes to these things, has done what you exactly said and followed the money. And a number of these bets from in the betting markets, let's take the stock market aside, but in the spreads markets have come from a couple, the biggest money is coming from a couple of sources, not clearly identified who they are. So that one, the betting market itself on who's going to win, I put that aside. But I think the bigger point that you're referring to is Donald Trump, he's being called a fascist. He's still holding on to a poll lead. In fact, saw a poll out earlier today where he's eased up a little bit. He's a point ahead of Harris, still within the margin of error. And I think the big talking point here, and I think the things that the Democrats should be very, very worried about, is that momentum that Kamala Harris had after being named at the top of the ticket, after having a fairly successful, well-choreographed Democratic convention. There was a little momentum there, but she hasn't been able to sustain it. And what we've been seeing over the past couple of days is she's going after Trump in the way he's going after her, a sort of a personalization of politics. Joe Biden tried this. It didn't work. Nobody is going to win this game. No one plays this game better than Donald Trump does. And when the Dems were doing their best in polling, it's when they were depicting Trump as sort of that kind of mad old uncle that you don't want to sit next to at Christmas dinner, that almost pitying look at him. That's when they were doing the best in polling. But coming in, when they're talking about, is he a fascist, using the word Nazi, which Dems haven't used, but Donald Trump has got that into his narrative in a funny old way that actually almost feeds into his strength. It makes him look like a stronger candidate. This didn't work for Biden. It's very difficult to beat Trump at his own game.
OK, Laurie Laird, excellent stuff as ever. Only 7 days to go now until the greatest political show on earth. Thank you very much for joining us. Loads more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, including a new poll shows Sir Keir Starmer is the least popular Prime Minister in modern history, with his approval ratings tanking an extraordinary 49 points down since his landslide election win in July. But first, it's time for your headlines, and here's Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. It's 5:33. These are your headlines. The suspect accused of murdering 3 young girls in July's Southport stabbing attacks is facing 2 new charges. Axel Rudakabana is now charged with producing the biological toxin ricin and possessing an Al-Qaeda training manual for potential terrorism preparation. The charges are separate to those over the killings of the girls. The police are not treating the stabbings as an act of terrorism. Rudakabana will appear via video link at Westminster Magistrates Court tomorrow. Conservative leadership candidate Robert Jenrick said he was concerned facts may have been withheld from the public. Meanwhile, Downing Street has denied the government had been involved in decision-making about the timing of the announcement about the charges against the Southport attack suspect. The Chancellor says the NHS is the lifeblood of Britain, promising to reverse a decade of neglect and underinvestment. But she warns that a single budget can't undo 14 years of damage. It comes as Rachel Reeves is set to unveil a budget injecting billions into the NHS, funding 2 million more appointments, with £1.5 billion aimed at new surgical hubs and scanners and £70 million for radiotherapy. However, speaking to us this morning, Health Secretary Wes Streeting admitted that significant improvements will take time.
What tomorrow's budget will give us the chance to do is arrest that decline and mark a turning point in the history of the NHS and in the decline we've seen over the last 14 years. Today what we're talking about is the delivery of our manifesto commitments to cut waiting lists. So the 40,000 more appointments every week we said as our first step, and we are already ramping up to those 40,000 more appointments.
Meanwhile, ahead of the budget tomorrow, Sir Keir Starmer has been told it is not too late to change his mind on winter fuel payment cuts, with Conservative MPs handing in a petition signed by 250,000 people. At this time of year, more than 11 million pensioners would normally be receiving a letter from the Department for Work and Pensions confirming when their winter fuel allowance would be paid. Instead, the letters arriving this year are informing approximately 10 million pensioners they will not be getting their usual payment. To the US now, where Donald Trump has taken aim at his rival Kamala Harris, accusing her of heartless and cold-blooded betrayal over borders. The Republican presidential candidate has been speaking at his Mar-a-Lago, Florida residence with 1 week to go till the US election. Despite keeping crowds waiting, he was greeted by chants of USA, USA. Trump also took a swipe at his rival, claiming she launched a coup to steal presidency from Joe Biden. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.3009 and €1.2034. The price of gold is £2,129 and 13 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's closed the day at 8,219 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Quite a cloudy afternoon on offer, largely dry, and there are also some brighter spells, particularly in southern and eastern areas. And where you catch that brighter weather, it is feeling mild for the time of year. We've currently got a cold front clearing the southeast of the country, and that's allowing a ridge of high pressure to build elsewhere. So as we head into the evening, there's going to be plenty of dry and fine weather around, a mix of cloud and some clearer spells. That cloud will be thick enough to produce some spots of rain and drizzle at times, and also where we see those clearer skies, we'll see some mist and fog developing, which may be rather stubborn to clear by the time we reach the morning. Feeling a little chillier under those prolonged clear spells, but for many, it's a rather mild night on offer. As we head through into Wednesday morning then, a fairly cloudy start across much of Scotland, perhaps some clearer spells across the Northern Isles, but can't rule out the risk of a shower. Similar across Northern Ireland, Northern England, a fairly cloudy start to tomorrow. That cloud once again thick enough to produce some drizzle, this mainly around hilly areas. And similar across the rest of England and Wales, a mix of cloud and some clearer spells and some pockets of mist and fog around to start the day too. But otherwise, that high pressure generally building, leaving plenty of fine, settled weather. Similar day to today, where we'll see a mix of cloud and some brighter spells at times. But on the whole, it is going to be largely dry. Perhaps some rain and showers just moving into the far northern Isles as we head into the afternoon. Slight dip in those temperatures, but still widely above average for the time of year. So still pleasant for this time in October. Through into the evening, we'll see another fairly similar evening, really. Once again, a mix of that cloud and those clear spells, and likely to see some mist and fog develop once again, and still with those outbreaks of rain moving into Orkney and Shetland. And to end the week and to start the weekend, remaining fairly similar. Cloud with some bright spells, and just a slight dip in the temperatures as we head into the weekend.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M6 northbound in Lancashire. It's partially blocked for an accident between junction 31 Samsbury and 31A Longridge. We're also seeing a slowdown on the opposite carriageway due to onlookers. Slow for the M42 southbound in the West Midlands due to an earlier accident on the slip road at junction 5, the Solihull bypass. Also in the West Midlands, we've got the usual slow traffic for the M5 northbound to join the M6 at junction 8. Stop-start traffic on the M49 northbound in Gloucestershire to join the M4 at the Prince of Wales Bridge. There's a lane closed for debris in the road, and long delays on the M25 clockwise in Hertfordshire. It's all due to an earlier broken down lorry in the roadworks at junction 23 South Mims. Congestion going back just before junction 22 St Albans. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:40. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, in yet more bad news for Keir Starmer now, as he suffers the biggest fall in approval ratings of any Prime Minister in the modern era. Look at that graph. It's going off the edge of a cliff. His personal rating has fallen to minus 38 points, and that's one day before the budget. So this could get worse before the week is out. Well, join me now to discuss this is the former Labour Minister, Ivor Kaplan. Ivor, welcome to the show. It must seem like a lifetime ago now. Tony Blair, he was plus 46 in 1997. Took him 3 years to go into net disapproval. It's taken Keir Starmer 3 months to become the least popular Prime Minister in modern history. Come on, stand up for your man.
Good afternoon, Martin. I can simply say that this is one poll, and of course it's disappointing in any situation like this. It's not the same as Tony Blair, and I've said this constantly over the last month or so to you and colleagues, and even over the weekend. And we know that this is difficult territory at the moment as we try to rebuild many of the issues that have come into Labour since being in power, and of course we have to do better, and we want to do better. And I think Keir is the right person to lead that, and he will be wanting to get this right tomorrow. One of the most interesting things that I was talking about over the weekend was, of course, right up to now, Tuesday night, they will still be playing with some of the documents in there. And I can safely say that, even when I was part of the ministerial team in those days, on the budget, it was always very, very tense and very, very late.
Isn't part of the problem, Ivor, things can only get better? We were sold so much optimism back in 1997. Now we've been sold nothing but endless misery. Winter fuel allowance, it's going to be misery for bus fares, for boozers, for savers, for shareholders, for homeowners, for landlords, for small business owners. They've given us their own constant stream of bad news. Isn't this an approval rating of their own making?
I think the one thing I would say, Martin, is most of what you've just said, with a limited numbers in the early bit of what you just said, but in the later bit, that's all what people have been told by various newspapers, mainly by the newspapers on the right, which I know would be astonishingly that GB News should have even bothered thinking that that was the right thing to look at. Look, let's get to tomorrow. I am so pleased, and all the things I've said.
Ivor, you cannot brush this onto the so-called conspiracy right-wing media. Yesterday, a poll came out saying that only 27% of Labour voters feel well represented by the Labour Party. This isn't just a right-wing conspiracy theory. Even the Labour Party's own voters are dissatisfied with the Prime Minister. That's the reality.
Well, I would just say, very simply, let's wait and see what happens after the budget. I always think to myself, and I've said over the years, that it's always the Thursday after the budget that counts. And we'll see how that is all, and all the bits and pieces that are going to make the budget tomorrow, make Rachel's speech. They are important, and they are meant to be the leadership of this. I believe that Keir Starmer will have the right way of dealing with the budget after this, and that will be critical to getting things right in the United Kingdom over the next few months.
Ivor, do you still believe in Santa Claus?
I didn't know he was standing.
The reason I say that is because I love your childlike optimism and your blind faith that everything will be delivered in a neat package on Christmas Day. Come on, it's not looking positive unless there is a miracle, not at Christmas, but at Halloween in the budget tomorrow.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't relating this to Santa Claus. I can definitely say that wasn't what I was saying. I was merely saying that when we get to the budget tomorrow, there will be a proper budget set out by the government of the day. We haven't had one for 14 years, and this is a very important event for the Labour Party and for the next 12 months. So it is critical, and it could even be longer than 12 months with some of the changes that they might want to see. So I'm always happy, Martin, for you to call me part of Santa Claus's team. I don't really worry about that. But I think tomorrow and Thursday and Friday are a critical period of time for the Labour Party.
Superb. You're a great sport. Thank you. Great fun. Ivor Kaplan, thank you for joining me once again here on GB News. Cheers, mate. Now, coming up, new Manchester United interim boss Ruud van Nistelrooy has deleted an 11-year-old social media post where he was in blackface. But was this necessary, and does anyone really care? Should he be cancelled, or is it just a bit of harmless fun? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Young adults spend a few years living away from home at university, those who go to university, but many then have no choice but to move back in with their parents because of the rising cost of renting.
But is this an excuse, and are Gen Z or Z just being lazy?
No, I mean, what do you make of it, Debbie? Because we do have to have some sympathy, don't we, in that, you know, rents are very high, it's very hard to get a mortgage. There are issues there.
I think the push towards young people to go to university as well is not necessarily the right thing for a lot of people. And I think people should start work early. These guys leave their universities with a huge amount of debt, no jobs, or huge rent. You know what I mean? It's just ridiculous. So I think we've got to look at the work ethic and start it younger. Because I think it's so easy just to move back with your mum and dad, isn't it?
To speak like a Gen Zer, they would say that, well, it's OK for your generation, you had it easy.
Realistically, that isn't quite that's true, because a lot of people then didn't go to university. This is a relatively new thing that everybody goes to university.
I have to say, what strikes me today is that you still have, amongst all these problems, not having enough money, going to university when perhaps you shouldn't be, all these sort of issues, you still get all these people saying, well, I'm going to have a year out.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. And I think the thing is, they say, oh, it was easy for you, but it wasn't really. We still had to rent places.
But the thing is with this debate, Debbie, is the generation we're talking about, Gen Z, who we're accusing of being lazy, have been raised by our generation.
Yeah.
So what have we done wrong that, if they are lazier, has made them like that?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's approaching 10 to 6. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, interim Manchester United coach Ruud van Nistelrooy was forced to delete a blackface photo just hours after being appointed to his new role. After Erik ten Hag, you can see that photograph on your screen now, and after Erik ten Hag was dismissed as the Red Devils boss yesterday, the former Man United striker was given the role and subsequently deleted the original image posted 11 years ago, showing him dressed as one of the Three Kings and wearing black makeup as he took part in the Parade of the Three Kings in Marbella, at the time where he visited children at a hospital at a charity event and handed out gifts and sweets. But should he have been forced to delete this image, and does anyone care? Or is it actually a sackable offence? Well, to discuss this blackface scandal in football, I'm joined now by the broadcaster and the neurodiversity coach, Fahima Mohammed. Welcome to the show, Fahima. So the image itself is causing something of raised eyebrows. What's your take on it?
I know that personally, a lot of people might think that it's not something to be worried about because it's the past. But when you are working in certain industries and fields, you are going to be under scrutiny and you are going to be looked upon for your dealings. I have just been vetted by the Ministry of Justice for my role because of who I am going to be coaching. So, you know, your past does matter. And football associations worldwide, including the English Football Association, the UEFA, have strict anti-discrimination policies designed to eliminate racism from sport. Even if it is something that is both off the field, meaning that racial insensitive acts, even from the past, can actually come under scrutiny. And Manchester United, for instance, is committed to anti-racism, and incidents like Van Nistelrooy's image could prompt internal discussions or policy review. Even if no legal action is taken, there could be repercussions or increased sort of like cultural sensitivity training within the club. So these things do play part, especially, for example, following the 2022 Euros, where individuals were racially abused, like Rashford and Sancho and Saka and things like that. So, you know, at the end of the day, these things are taken seriously for people that may find this offensive, even if it's not the whole.
The trouble with that argument you're making there is that people weren't offended in the Netherlands. It's actually routine to do this. It's part of a tradition there. This image is 13 years old. Nobody's complained. Nobody's cared about it until now. In fact, I think I've got another image I can put on the screen now. Another fantastic Dutch footballer, Ruud Gullit. You remember him? These are fans at the recent European Championships in 2024. Some white guys there, blacked up with their Rasta wigs on. And Ruud Gullit responded to that, saying he felt honoured when fans did that. It's fun. It's on the terraces. It's not part of the Media Mouth diversity campaign. This is terrace culture. It's a bit of fun. Nobody's offended in Holland. Nobody really is offended in football. So why should it matter?
I don't know if nobody's offended in football and nobody's offended in certain places. Otherwise, these things would not be there in the first place. At the end of the day, there have been studies, cognitive psychology studies that I've just picked up recently, which actually shows that at the end of the day, these triggering stereotypical judgments do play part to minorities, and it does impact them. So, you know, even if they are not subjugated in such a way to represent racism, they will actually fall under the lines of stereotypical social divisions, even if it is a bit.
Do you mind me asking? Are you a football fan? Do you go to football matches? Do you understand terrace culture, or are you looking about this from a kind of HR point of view within the public sector?
I'm looking at it from all aspects, actually. I have two very young sons who do go to football sort of games. They have been with their dad. I actually am part of the British Society, where I do understand whether it's working in this kind of, you know, certain industries or people from minority groups. And I'm looking at it from a psychological point of view, so that you cannot generalize to say that people are not offended, because he would not have deleted it. They also have company regulations and policies where he obviously believes that it might be offensive. That's why he was deleted it and told to be deleted. So there's obviously a reasoning behind that.
Okay, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. We've simply run out of time. Thanks for joining us, Fahima Mohammed. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. That's all from me today. In fact, it's not. I'm back 7 till 8. But up next is Jubes & Co., the queen of primetime political debate, the fiercest debate show on TV. See you soon. And first, here's your weather with Honor Krizik.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Quite a cloudy afternoon on offer, largely dry, and there are also some brighter spells, particularly in southern and eastern areas. And where you catch that brighter weather, it is feeling mild for the time of year. We've currently got a cold front clearing the southeast of the country, and that's allowing a ridge of high pressure to build elsewhere. So as we head into the evening, there's going to be plenty of dry and fine weather around, a mix of cloud and some clearer spells. That cloud will be thick enough to produce some spots of rain and drizzle at times, and also where we see those clearer skies, we'll see some mist and fog developing, which may be rather stubborn to clear by the time we reach the morning. Feeling a little chillier under those prolonged clear spells, but for many, it's a rather mild night on offer. As we head through into Wednesday morning then, a fairly cloudy start across much of Scotland, perhaps some clearer spells across the Northern Isles, but can't rule out the risk of a shower. Similar across Northern Ireland, Northern England, a fairly cloudy start to tomorrow. That cloud once again thick enough to produce some drizzle, this mainly